She was 8 months
This
pregnant when
footage
she felt
places
hands
you
on
at
her
the
back.
scene, Miss
Not
Meredith.
helping hands, not loving hands, hands
It's
that
not
pushed.
me.
Meredith Ashford tumbled down
I don't
22
know
marble
what that
steps in her own
is.
mansion. Her skull cracked against the floor, her wrist shattered. Her body bounced like a rag doll while she desperately tried to protect the baby inside her. And at the top of the stairs, her husband's mistress stood watching, smiling, whispering one single word. Oops. She thought she got away with it. She thought no one saw. She thought she had committed the perfect crime. But there was something she didn't know, something that would destroy everything. A nanny cam, hidden in the hallway, recording every single second. What happens next will shock you, because this isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about a 2-year affair, a 20-year obsession, $47 million in stolen money, and a conspiracy so twisted you won't believe it's based on real events. But here's what I promise you. By the end of this story, you will watch a broken woman rise from the ashes. You will watch the guilty pay for every lie, and you will witness a revenge so satisfying, so complete, that you'll want to stand up and cheer. Stay with me until the end. Trust me. You don't want to miss what happens when the footage plays in court. The last thing Meredith heard before her body hit the marble was Sloane's whisper. Oops. One word, soft as silk, cold as ice, dripping with satisfaction. Then gravity claimed her. Time stretched into something strange and elastic. Each second lasted an eternity as Meredith tumbled down the grand staircase of the Ashford mansion. 22 marble steps. She would learn that number later. 22 steps between the woman she had been and the woman she would become. Her hands flew to her belly as she fell. 8 months pregnant. 32 weeks of growing this tiny life inside her. Every instinct, every fiber of her being screamed one thing: protect the baby. Protect the baby. Protect the baby. Her shoulder slammed against the wrought iron railing. Pain exploded through her arm. Her hip cracked against a step. Then another. Her body twisted, curled, trying to shield her swollen abdomen from the impacts that kept coming. The crystal chandelier above her spun. Fractured light scattered across her vision like broken stars. The smell of lemon polish filled her nostrils. The same polish the housekeepers used every Tuesday. She had always loved that smell. Now it would haunt her forever. Her wrist bent at an angle that sent tightening through her entire arm. She heard something crack, felt the wrongness of bones shifting where they shouldn't shift. The marble floor rushed up to meet her. She heard her own skull connect with stone. A sickening thud that seemed to echo through the mansion's grand foyer. The sound was wet, heavy, final. The last image burned into her mind was Sloane Whitmore standing at the top of the stairs, perfectly still, watching, a small smile playing at the corner of her lips. Those red-painted lips that Meredith had complimented Kermal just last month at the company Christmas party. Such a lovely shade, she had said. It really suits you. Sloane had smiled then too, the same smile she wore now, the smile of a woman who had gotten exactly what she wanted. Then darkness swallowed everything. Meredith surfaced slowly, like swimming up through dark water toward a distant, wavering light. The journey felt endless. Every time she thought she was close to breaking through, something would pull her back down. Voices came and went. Hands touched her. Machines beeped in rhythms she couldn't understand. Finally, after what might have been hours or days or weeks, she opened her eyes. White ceiling, harsh fluorescent lights, the antiseptic smell of hospital disinfectant, sharp, chemical, wrong. So different from the lemon polish of her home. Was it still her home? Had it ever been? She tried to move and pain exploded through her wrist. A soft cry escaped her lips before she could stop it. Mary, Mary, can you hear me? Harper's face swam into focus. Her best friend since nursing school. They had met over a cadaver in anatomy class, both of them green-faced and determined not to be the first to vomit. 12 years of friendship built on that moment of shared weakness. Now Harper looked worse than Meredith had ever seen her. Dark circles under her eyes. Deep lines of worry creasing her forehead. Her usually perfect ponytail was disheveled. Strands escaping in every direction. How long had she been sitting in that uncomfortable plastic chair? The baby, Meredith croaked. Her throat felt like sandpaper, like she had swallowed broken glass. Her hand moved to her belly. Still round, still there. But was it still moving? Was the baby still alive? She couldn't feel anything through the fog of pain and medication. Panic clawed at her chest with sharp, desperate fingers. The baby's fine. Harper grabbed her hand, squeezed hard, almost too hard. The baby's perfect. Strong heartbeat. No distress. You protected her, Mary. Even falling. Even with everything. You protected her. Tears leaked from the corners of Meredith's eyes, relief so intense it physically hurt. More painful than the broken wrist, the bruised ribs, the throbbing in her skull. She counted in her head, the way Dr. Brennan had taught her during prenatal visits. 1, 2, 3, breathe, feel, wait. Then she felt it. A tiny kick against her palm. Strong, insistent, demanding attention the way her daughter already did even before being born. Her little fighter was still there, still surviving, still refusing to give up. What happened? Meredith whispered. The memories were foggy, fragmented, like a mirror that had been shattered and hastily glued back together. Pieces were missing, others were in the wrong place. She remembered stairs, the grand staircase she had descended thousands of times over 6 years of marriage. She remembered someone behind her, the click of heels on marble, the scent of expensive perfume that wasn't hers. And that word, that horrible, satisfied word. Oops. You fell, Harper said carefully, her nurse's training evident in the measured tone. The careful word choice. At the mansion, down the main staircase. Lucia found you at the bottom. She called 911. Lucia, the housekeeper they had hired 3 months ago to help prepare for the baby. A warm woman in her mid-40s with kind eyes and capable hands. Efficient, trustworthy. Meredith had liked her immediately, had felt safe with her in the house. Where's Preston? Something flickered across Harper's face. A shadow, a darkness. Her grip on Meredith's hand tightened almost imperceptibly. He's on his way. On his way? Meredith tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. The room tilted violently. Her head throbbed with a pain that pulsed behind her left eye like a second heartbeat. Nausea rolled through her stomach. How long have I been here? 6 hours. 6 hours. Her husband had been unreachable for 6 hours while she lay unconscious in a hospital bed, while their unborn daughter's life hung in the balance, while doctors ran tests and monitors beeped, and Harper sat alone in this sterile room, waiting. Something cold settled in Meredith's stomach, something that had nothing to do with her injuries. She thought about all the times Preston had been unreachable, the business trips that ran long, the meetings that couldn't be interrupted, the phone that was always on silent when she needed him most. She had made excuses for years. He was busy. He was successful. He was building something important. But 6 hours? While his pregnant wife lay in the hospital? The door opened and a woman in a white coat entered, Dr. Catherine Brennan. Meredith recognized her from prenatal appointments. Calm, competent, the kind of doctor who made you feel safe just by walking into the room. She had delivered hundreds of babies, had seen every complication, every crisis, every miracle. Her presence was reassuring in a way that nothing else had been since Meredith woke up. Mrs. Ashford, good to see you awake. Dr. Brennan checked the monitors, made notes on her tablet. Her movements were efficient, practiced. You have a concussion, moderate to severe. Your left wrist is fractured in 2 places. You have multiple contusions on your hip and shoulder, 3 bruised ribs, and some superficial lacerations that required stitches. You're going to be sore for weeks, maybe months. But the baby? Your daughter is remarkably resilient. We've been monitoring her continuously since you arrived. Heartbeat strong and steady. No signs of placental abruption. No fetal distress. No indication of any trauma whatsoever. Dr. Brennan paused, looked at Meredith with something like wonder. Honestly, Mrs. Ashford, I've seen falls from much shorter heights end in tragedy. The fact that you and your baby survived with the injuries you have is nothing short of miraculous. Miraculous. Lucky. These words kept being applied to her situation. But Meredith didn't feel lucky. She felt broken, confused, like the ground beneath her feet had shifted and she couldn't find her balance anymore. Doctor, Harper said quietly, the police are here. They want to speak with her. Meredith's heart stuttered, skipped a beat. Police? Why would the police be here? Dr. Brennan and Harper exchanged a glance. That silent communication between medical professionals that always meant something was being left unsaid. Something important. Something that would change everything. There are some questions about your fall, Dr. Brennan said carefully, choosing each word with precision. About how it happened. They need your statement when you are ready. I fell down the stairs. That's what happened. I lost my balance and I fell. Mary. Harper leaned closer. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper, intimate, urgent. Lucia found something on the nanny cam. The nanny cam. Meredith had almost forgotten about it. Preston had insisted on installing it last month. For when the baby came, he said, to watch the nursery, to make sure everything was safe, to give them peace of mind when they couldn't be in the room. They had tested it in the upstairs hallway because the nursery wasn't finished yet. The painters were still working on the mural. The furniture hadn't arrived. The upstairs hallway, where the stairs began, where she had been standing before she fell. What did she find? Before Harper could answer, the door swung open again. Preston strode in like he owned the place, which technically he did. Preston Ashford owned a lot of things. A tech company worth $200 million. A mansion in the hills with 14 rooms and a view of the entire city. A fleet of luxury cars. A private jet. A vacation home in Aspen and an apartment in Manhattan and a yacht docked in Monaco. And her. For 6 years, he had owned her too. She just hadn't realized it until this moment. Meredith. He crossed to the bed in 3 long strides, pressed a kiss to her forehead. His lips were cold. His breath smelled like coffee and something else. Something floral, familiar. Thank God you're all right. I came as soon as I heard. 6 hours, she said quietly. It took you 6 hours. I was in meetings. My phone was off. You know how important the quarterly review is. The board members flew in from Tokyo. I couldn't just walk out. His hand found hers. The gesture felt automatic, rehearsed, like something he had seen in movies and was now performing for an audience. I'm here now. That's what matters. Meredith studied her husband's face. Square jaw, blue eyes, the silver threading through his dark hair at the temples that she had always found distinguished. Handsome in that corporate way. Like a man who belonged on magazine covers and in boardrooms and at the head of long tables where important decisions were made. She had fallen in love with that face once, had trusted that face with her life, her future, her heart. Now she searched it for something she couldn't name, something that should have been there and wasn't. Concern, fear, love. The expression he wore was wrong somehow, like a mask that didn't quite fit. Mr. Ashford. A man appeared in the doorway, broad shoulders, tired eyes, the kind of exhaustion that came from seeing too much human darkness. A badge was clipped to his belt. Gold. Official. I'm Detective Thomas Brennan. No relation to the doctor before you ask. I have some questions about your wife's accident. Of course. Preston straightened, slipped into his professional voice, the one he used for investors and journalists and anyone he needed to charm. Smooth, controlled, unflappable. Anything to help. My wife's safety is my top priority. Actually, sir, I'd like to speak with Mrs. Ashford alone first. The detective's gaze was steady, unreadable, giving nothing away. Standard procedure in cases like this. Preston's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. But Meredith had been married to him for 6 years. She knew every micro-expression, every tell, every tiny movement that betrayed what he was thinking beneath the polished surface. And that particular twitch meant he was unhappy about something, worried about something, afraid of something. I don't think my wife needs to be interrogated in her condition. She's been through a traumatic experience. She needs rest, not questions. It's not an interrogation, sir, just some questions. Detective Brennan held up a tablet. The screen was dark, but Meredith could see her own reflection in the glass. Pale, bruised, barely recognizable. We have footage we'd like her to review. Preston went still. The stillness caught Meredith's attention more than anything else. Her husband was never still. He was always moving, talking, commanding, filling every room with his presence and his energy. He couldn't sit through a movie without checking his phone, couldn't have a conversation without pacing. couldn't exist without motion. But in that moment, he froze, like a man who had just seen something terrible, like a man who had just heard very bad news. Footage? His voice stayed level, casual, but something underneath had shifted, cracked. From where? The nanny cam in the upstairs hallway, Detective Brennan said. Your housekeeper retrieved the recording and contacted us. She was quite concerned about what she saw. Preston's eyes darted to Meredith. Then away, quick, guilty. His hand was still holding hers, but his grip had gone slack. Lifeless. I'd like to see it, Meredith said. Her voice sounded stronger now, clearer. Something was happening here. Something she didn't understand yet. But she would. She would see it with her own eyes, and then she would know. Whatever it is, I want to see it. Detective Brennan nodded. He pulled a chair closer to the bed, sat down, turned the tablet around and pressed play. The footage was grainy, black and white, security camera quality, not Hollywood production. But clear enough, more than clear enough. She saw herself standing at the top of the grand staircase, her hand on the wrought iron railing, her other hand holding her phone. She had been looking at something on the screen, a text maybe, or an email. She couldn't remember now. It seemed so unimportant compared to everything that came after. Then a figure appeared behind her, Sloane Whitmore. 29 years old, blonde, beautiful in that sharp, angular way that photographed well and looked good in boardrooms. She had been Preston's executive assistant for 3 years. Efficient, professional, always perfectly dressed in designer clothes that were just slightly inappropriate for an office setting. Too tight, too short, too much skin. Meredith had never thought much about her beyond mild gratitude that she kept Preston's schedule organized, beyond occasional curiosity about how she afforded those designer clothes on an assistant's salary. On the screen, Sloane moved closer. Her lips were moving, saying something. The audio was muffled, but her expression was clear. Venom, pure, undiluted hatred twisting her pretty features into something ugly, something monstrous. Meredith watched herself turn, saw the confusion on her own face, the beginning of a question forming on her lips. What are you doing here? Or maybe, can I help you? The polite responses of a woman who didn't yet understand she was in danger. Then Sloane's hand shot out. The push was deliberate, forceful. No accident, no stumble, no attempt to help or steady or catch. Sloane Whitmore placed both palms flat against Meredith's back and shoved with all her strength. A violent, purposeful push designed to send her tumbling down 22 marble steps. The tablet showed Meredith falling, tumbling, her body bouncing off steps like a rag doll, arms flailing, legs twisting, the horrifying helplessness of someone with no control over their own body. Then Sloane's face filled the frame. She had moved to the edge of the stairs, looking down at where Meredith had landed, watching. Her lips curved into a small, satisfied smile. The smile of a woman who had accomplished something she had been planning for a long time. Then the expression changed, transformed. Horror replaced satisfaction in an instant. Her mouth opened in a practiced scream. She ran down the stairs with theatrical urgency. The performance was flawless. Concerned colleague rushing to help. Innocent bystander who had witnessed a terrible accident. No one would have known, except the camera knew. The camera saw everything. The tablet screen went dark. The hospital room was completely silent. Harper had her hand pressed over her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. Dr. Brennan stood frozen by the monitors, professional composure cracked. Detective Brennan watched them all with careful, assessing eyes. And Preston. Preston was staring at the tablet with an expression Meredith had never seen before. Not horror at what Sloane had done. Not rage at the woman who had tried to kill his pregnant wife. Not grief or shock or any of the things a loving husband should feel in this moment. Not even surprise. Fear. Preston Ashford was afraid. But not afraid for her. Afraid of something else entirely. Afraid of what this meant. What it revealed. What would happen next. Where did you get that? His voice came out rough, strangled. That's private property. You can't just take footage from our home without a warrant. Your housekeeper provided it voluntarily, sir. Detective Brennan's tone had gone flat, professional, the tone of a man who had seen enough guilty reactions to recognize the one when he saw it. She witnessed the aftermath and secured the evidence before anyone could tamper with it. Tamper? What are you implying? This is clearly a misunderstanding. Sloane was probably trying to catch her. My wife lost her balance and Sloane tried to help. The angle makes it look wrong, but I'm sure if you talked to Sloane, she could explain everything. Meredith heard the words, but they didn't make sense. She watched them come out of her husband's mouth, and they might as well have been in a foreign language. He wasn't defending her. He wasn't demanding Sloane's arrest. He wasn't even asking if she was okay. He was protecting Sloane. You knew, Meredith said. The room went silent again, somehow even more silent than before. The kind of silence that precedes earthquakes and explosions and the end of everything familiar. Preston finally looked at her, really looked at her, and in his eyes she saw everything she needed to know. The guilt, the calculation, the way he was already planning his next move, the way he had always been 3 steps ahead, playing a game she didn't even know existed. Meredith, let's not do this here. Let's not make a scene. You knew about her, about you and her. Her voice cracked, splintered like glass. How long? This isn't the time or place for this conversation. You're injured. You need rest. We can talk about this later, in private, when you're feeling better. How long, Preston? He ran a hand through his hair, that familiar gesture of frustration, of annoyance. The same gesture he made when she asked too many questions about his schedule, when she wanted to talk about their relationship, when she did anything that inconvenienced him. She had always apologized when he made that gesture, had backed down, had told herself she was being too demanding, too needy, too much. Not anymore. It's complicated, he said. She pushed me down the stairs. She tried to kill our baby. Meredith's hand found her belly again, protectively, instinctively, feeling for that reassuring kick. And you're protecting her. You're standing there defending the woman who tried to murder your daughter. How long has this been going on? Preston's mouth opened, closed, opened again. For the first time in their marriage, her husband seemed to have no words, no smooth explanation, no charming deflection. 2 years, he finally said. The words dropped like stones into still water, creating ripples that would spread out forever. Give or take. 2 years, 730 days of lies. 2 years of late nights that weren't really about work. 2 years of business trips where his assistant just happened to accompany him for important meetings. 2 years of looking her in the eye every morning and telling her he loved her while he was sleeping with someone else every night. 2 years of building a life on a foundation of sand. Of quicksand. Of nothing at all. Meredith started to laugh. The sound surprised her. Harsh and broken and completely wrong for a hospital room. But she couldn't stop. The absurdity of it all. The sheer, devastating absurdity. She had trusted him. She had loved him. She had given him everything she had to give. And he had been betraying her the entire time. Get out, she said when the laughter died. Meredith, let me explain. It's not what you think. Sloane and I, we have a connection, but it doesn't mean I don't love you. These things are complicated. Adults understand that relationships are nuanced. Detective Brennan, she didn't look at Preston, couldn't look at him. If she looked at him, she might shatter completely. I want to press charges, assault, attempted murder, whatever you can make stick. I want her arrested, and I want her to pay for what she did. Already done, Mrs. Ashford. The detective's voice was gentle now, almost kind, the voice of someone who had delivered this kind of news before, who knew how to handle the broken pieces of shattered lives. Ms. Whitmore was taken into custody an hour ago. She's claiming you fell, that she tried to catch you, that this is all a terrible misunderstanding. The footage shows otherwise. Yes, it does. Preston was still standing there, still taking up space, still breathing the same air. His presence was suffocating, contaminating. Meredith couldn't stand it. The sight of him made her physically ill. I said, get out. We need to talk about this, privately, without the police listening, without your friend judging. He gestured at Harper like she was an inconvenience, a piece of furniture in the way. This is between us, our marriage, our family, our business. No, The word came out strong, steady, surprising even herself. It was possibly the first time in 6 years she had said no to him and meant it. Nothing is between us anymore. You chose her, over me, over our daughter. You're protecting the woman who tried to kill us. There's nothing left to discuss. You're being emotional. It's the hormones, the stress of the fall, the medication they're giving you. You're not thinking clearly. When you calm down, when you've had time to process, you'll see this differently. Harper made a sound, low and dangerous, like a growl from an animal protecting its young. You need to leave now before I call security and have you removed. This is my wife, my baby. You can't keep me from them. I have rights. Actually, sir, Detective Brennan stepped forward, positioned himself between Preston and the bed. His hand rested casually near his badge, near his weapon. Given the circumstances, I think it would be best if you left voluntarily. We'll need to interview you separately about your knowledge of Ms. Whitmore's intentions and activities. And I should advise you that anything you say right now could be used in our investigation. Preston's face cycled through emotions. Anger, calculation, forced calm, the mask slipping and reforming, slipping and reforming. Finally, he took a step back. This isn't over, Meredith. We're going to talk about this. When you've calmed down, when you're thinking rationally, when you realize what you're throwing away. He walked out without looking back. The door clicked shut behind him. And Meredith finally let herself cry. Not gentle tears, not quiet weeping. These were sobs that tore from somewhere deep inside her. Ugly, loud, primal. The sound of a woman whose entire world had just collapsed, whose foundation had crumbled, whose future had been ripped away and replaced with something terrifying and unknown. Harper held her, didn't say anything, just held her and let her cry and handed her tissues and held her some more. The way a best friend does, the way a sister does, the way someone who loves you without conditions or agendas does. Outside the hospital window, the sun was setting, pink and gold and ordinary, the world going on as if nothing had changed, as if Meredith Ashford hadn't just learned that everything she believed was a lie. But something had changed. Everything had changed, and there was no going back. 3 days passed in a blur of hospital routine. Doctors checking vitals every 4 hours. Nurses monitoring the baby's heartbeat with machines that beeped in Word and printed out long strips of paper covered in wavy lines. Physical therapists teaching Meredith to work around her fractured wrist, to compensate for the cracked ribs that made every breath a small exercise in pain management. Harper stayed through all of it, sleeping in the uncomfortable plastic chair beside the bed, bringing real coffee from the good cafe down the street instead of the watery hospital version, screening phone calls and turning away visitors and fielding questions from well-meaning acquaintances who had seen the news coverage. Because there was news coverage now. The story had leaked somehow, maybe from a hospital employee, maybe from the police department, maybe from Preston's company, where rumors spread faster than viruses. Tech mogul's pregnant wife injured in fall. Mistress questioned in connection with assault. The headlines were everywhere. Meredith didn't read them. Harper made sure of that. Preston didn't come back. He texted once on the second day, a long message about needing space, about how complicated things were, about how he hoped she would see reason once the initial shock wore off, about how 20 years of friendship with Sloane couldn't just be thrown away over one moment of poor judgment. Meredith read it twice. Let every word sink in. 20 years of friendship. He had known Sloane for 20 years, since before he met Meredith, since before his first company, since before everything. She had never known. He had never mentioned it. In 6 years of marriage, countless conversations about his past, his history, his relationships, he had never once mentioned that his executive assistant was an old friend, a close friend, a friend of 20 years. She deleted the message without responding, blocked his number. It wasn't enough, but it was something. On the third morning, Detective Brennan returned. He looked tired, the kind of tired that came from too many late nights and too much coffee, and the weight of other people's tragedies pressing down on your shoulders. Meredith recognized that look. She had seen it in the mirror too many times over the past 3 days. Sloan Whitmore's arraignment was yesterday, he said, settling into the chair Harper had vacated for a coffee run. She's out on bail, $250,000. Your husband posted it within the hour. Meredith nodded. She had expected that. The initial shock had faded into something colder over the past few days, something harder, something that didn't have room for surprise anymore. She's still claiming it was an accident? Her lawyer's going with the defense that she was trying to catch you when you tripped, that her hands were positioned behind you to help, not to push, that the footage is misleading, taken out of context, doesn't show the full picture. On the detective's expression made clear what he thought of that argument. But we had our tech people enhance the audio from the recording. They were able to isolate her voice, clear as day. She said something before she pushed you. Oops, Detective Brennan blinked. You remember? I remember everything. Meredith's hand rested on her belly. The baby kicked against her palm. Strong, healthy, a little fighter who had survived the unsurvivable. I just didn't understand what I was remembering until I saw the footage. It was like my brain had recorded it, but filed it in the wrong place. I thought I imagined it. That horrible little word, that satisfied little whisper. The audio will help the prosecution significantly. That one word establishes intent. It shows she knew exactly what she was doing and took pleasure in it. He paused, leaned forward. Along with her expression after you fell, that smile, the way she watched you lying there. Juries respond to that kind of thing. They see it and they know they're looking at someone without remorse. Will it be enough for a conviction? I've seen cases with less evidence go all the way. The footage is damning. The audio is damning. The smile is damning. He paused again. Something shifted in his expression. Something careful. But I should warn you, her attorney is expensive. One of the best criminal defense lawyers in the state, and your husband seems willing to fund a vigorous defense. He's hired a PR firm too. There are already stories circulating about you, about mental instability, about jealousy, about hormones making pregnant women paranoid and irrational. Of course Preston was fighting back. Of course he was trying to rewrite the narrative. That was what he did. That was what he had always done. Control the story, control the perception, control everything and everyone around him. I spoke with Lucia Rodriguez, Detective Brennan continued, your housekeeper. She's been very cooperative, very helpful. Something in his tone suggested there was more. She had additional information she thought you should know. Additional information? The nanny cam in the hallway wasn't the only recording device in your home. Apparently your husband had cameras installed throughout the mansion. Security purposes, he said. The footage backs up to a cloud server. Lucia has been with you for 3 months, and in that time, she's noticed some concerning things. She saved copies of several recordings. She thought you should see them. Before Meredith could ask what that meant, the door opened. Harper returned with 2 cups of coffee and a paper bag that smelled like cinnamon rolls. Behind her was Lucia herself, small and solid, with kind eyes that had seen too much and capable hands that had cleaned up too many messes. She looked nervous, uncomfortable, like someone about to deliver bad news but determined to do it anyway. Mrs. Ashford, Lucia clutched a USB drive in her fingers. Her knuckles were white. Her accent was barely noticeable after 40 years in America, but it grew stronger when she was emotional. I'm so sorry. I should have told you sooner. I should have said something. I didn't know how. I didn't know if it was my place. You were my employer's wife, and I was just the help. And I thought maybe I was seeing things wrong, understanding things wrong. Told me what, Lucia? The older woman exchanged a glance with Detective Brennan. He nodded slightly. Permission, encouragement. I was let go, Lucia said, yesterday morning. Mr. Ashford called me personally, told me my services were no longer required, said he would have my final check mailed, said if I spoke to anyone about what I had seen or heard in the house, there would be consequences, legal consequences. He fired you for calling the police, for saving my life? I think so, yes, for the footage, for not coming to him first, for not being loyal. Lucia's lip trembled. But before I left, Before I turned in my keys, I made copies of everything, not just the day you fell, all of it. Everything the cameras recorded for the past 4 months. She held out the USB drive like an offering, like a grenade with the pin already pulled, like something that could destroy or save, depending on who held it and how they used it. Harper took it, connected it to her laptop. The screen filled with file folders, dates going back to August, dozens of recordings, hundreds of hours of footage, a documentary of a marriage that Meredith hadn't known she was starring in. What am I looking at? The truth, Lucia said quietly, about what's been happening in your home while you were away, while you were at work, at appointments, visiting your mother before she passed. Her voice caught. I'm sorry, Mrs. Ashford. I'm so sorry you have to see this, but you need to know. You deserve to know. Harper clicked on a file at random. September 15th, the master bedroom, Meredith's bedroom, the room she had decorated herself, choosing every fabric and color and piece of furniture. The bed with the hand-carved headboard she had found at an antique shop in Vermont. Her wedding photo on the nightstand. Her grandmother's quilt folded at the foot of the bed. Her closet visible through the open door, full of the clothes she wore, the life she lived. Sloane was in the frame. She was wearing Meredith's silk robe, the blue one with the embroidered cherry blossoms, a gift from her mother for her 30th birthday. Her mother had spent weeks looking for it, had it shipped from a specialty store in Kyoto, had wrapped it with hands that were already trembling from the illness that would take her 6 months later. Sloane was sitting at Meredith's vanity, using Meredith's hairbrush, the silver one that had belonged to her grandmother, spraying Meredith's perfume. The bottle Preston had given her for their first anniversary. Preston walked into the shot. His shirt was unbuttoned, his feet bare, his hair disheveled in a way Meredith recognized, a way that meant he had been in bed, that he had just woken up, or that he hadn't slept at all. She won't be back until Tuesday, he said. His voice was casual, comfortable, the voice of a man in his own home with someone he was completely at ease with. Stop worrying, you can relax. I'm not worried, I just wish you'd tell her already. Get it over with. I'm tired of sneaking around like we're doing something wrong. The timing has to be right. After the baby's born, after I have an heir, someone to inherit everything I've built, then we can make this official. Then we can be together publicly. Sloane turned in the chair, looked up at him with something that might have been love, might have been possession, might have been satisfaction at a plan coming together. And what about her? She's not just going to disappear. She's not going to hand over everything and walk away. She'll take a settlement. Meredith isn't complicated. She's practical. She'll do the math and realize it's better to take the money and start over than to fight. Preston loosened his tie, draped it over a chair, the chair where Meredith laid out her clothes each night, planning her outfits for the next day. She's been useful, a good wife for the public image, decent hostess, photographs well at company events. But let's be honest, Sloane, the passion died years ago, if it was ever really there at all. Useful. The word hit Meredith like a physical blow, harder than the marble floor, harder than any of the injuries she was still recovering from. She had been useful, like a tool, like an appliance, like something you kept around because it served a purpose and discarded when it didn't. Keep playing, she heard herself say. Her voice sounded far away, like it belonged to someone else, someone stronger, someone who could watch this without breaking. I want to see all of it. Over the next hour, she watched her marriage unravel in recorded fragments. Sloane and Preston in every room of the mansion, the kitchen where Meredith had learned to make his favorite meals, the living room where they had celebrated anniversaries and hosted parties, the garden where she had planted roses that bloomed every spring, the bedroom where she had made love to him and slept beside him and dreamed about their future together. She watched them laugh together at inside jokes she didn't understand, planned together for a future that didn't include her, discussed the divorce like it was a business transaction with assets and liabilities and acceptable losses. She watched Sloane wear her clothes, use her makeup, sleep in her bed, drink from her favorite coffee mug, take over her life piece by piece, item by item, while Meredith remained oblivious. In one clip dated 3 months ago, Sloane's voice turned cold. The pregnancy complicates things. Preston was at his home office desk, papers spread out in front of him, numbers and contracts in the building blocks of his empire. I know. I tried to convince her to wait another year, to focus on her career first, to make sure we were ready, but she wanted to start a family. He sighed, the put-upon sigh of a man dealing with an inconvenience. She's always wanted children. It was one of the things we talked about when we first met. I thought I could keep putting her off, but she was getting suspicious, starting to ask questions. So you got her pregnant to stop her from asking questions? I got her pregnant because it was easier than explaining why I didn't want to, and because a child ties her to me, makes her less likely to leave, less likely to cause problems when the time comes. You should have been more careful. You should have just told her the truth. And say what? Sorry, darling, but I've been in love with someone else for 20 years and I only married you for your family connections and your willingness to play the supportive wife? He laughed, bitter, cold. She would have made a scene, gone to the press, damaged my reputation. This way is cleaner. Cleaner. There's going to be a baby, Preston, a real human being, your child. My heir, that's different. He looked up from his papers, met Sloane's eyes. The Ashford name needs to continue. My mother has been pressuring me for years. A child with the right genetics, the right background, raised with the right values. Meredith comes from good stock, educated, attractive, no history of mental illness or hereditary conditions. She'll produce a healthy heir, and then she'll be taken care of, and we can finally be together. Taken care of, like she was a problem to be solved, an obstacle to be removed. Sloane moved closer to the desk, leaned against it. Her eyes were calculating, sharp. And if I don't want to wait 9 more months, another year while you play house and pretend to be the happy, expectant father, then you'll have to learn patience. I've been patient for 20 years, Preston. I was patient when you married that first wife fresh out of college. I was patient when you divorced her, and I thought you'd finally choose me, and then you met Meredith at that fundraiser. I was patient when you proposed to her 3 months later and told me it was just for show, just for business, just for a few years until your company was stable. And I've always come back to you. I've always kept my promises. Just wait a little longer. There are other options. Sloane's voice dropped, darker, colder. Pregnancies fail all the time. Accidents happen. Women fall downstairs. Women have complications. Women miscarry. It's tragic, but it's common. No one would blame you. The room was silent. Meredith watched Preston's face on the screen, watched him consider what Sloane was suggesting, watched him weigh the options, the calculations visible behind his eyes. Let's not go there, he finally said. Not yet. She'll have the baby. I'll wait a decent interval, a year, maybe 2. Then we proceed as planned. A quiet divorce, a generous settlement, a non-disclosure agreement, and then we can finally have the life we've always wanted. And if I don't want to wait, then you'll have to trust me the way you had always trusted me, the way you always will. The footage ended. The screen went dark. Meredith stared at the frozen timestamp. October 15th, 3 weeks before the fall, 3 weeks before Sloane decided she was done waiting. There's one more, Lucia said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. From 2 weeks before you fell. It's the worst one. I wasn't sure if I should show you. Show me. The timestamp read October 29th. The location was the mansion's second-floor hallway, near the stairs. The same hallway where Meredith would fall 22 steps to the marble floor below. Sloane was on the phone, her back to the camera, but her voice was clear, confident. The voice of someone who had made a decision and was not going to be talked out of it. I don't care what he says. I'm done waiting. I've waited 20 years. I've watched him marry 2 other women. I've been the secret, the mistress, the dirty little truth he keeps hidden. I'm not doing it anymore. A pause, listening to whoever was on the other end. Mother, I know what I'm doing. I have a plan. Another pause. If she doesn't have an accident soon, I'll make sure she has one. It's not that complicated. The stairs are steep. She's pregnant. She's tired all the time. Always distracted. Always looking at her phone. Always forgetting to hold the railing. These things happen. They happen every day. Meredith felt the blood drain from her face, felt her hands go cold, felt her heart beating too fast, too hard, threatening to burst out of her chest. I'm not bluffing, Mother. I've put in 3 years with this man in his house, 20 years of my life waiting for him, loving him, believing him when he said I was the one he really wanted. She had everything I deserve, the house, the name, the social position, the husband. Sloane's voice turned hard, bitter. And she didn't even appreciate it. She was so oblivious, so trusting, following him around like a puppy, believing every lie he told her. It was pathetic to watch. Another pause. I don't care about consequences. I care about results. And the result I want is to be Mrs. Preston Ashford, the real Mrs. Ashford, not the placeholder, not the waiting room, the actual wife. Her voice softened, almost tender. I deserve it, Mother. After everything I've sacrificed, after all the years I've waited, I deserve to have what I want. The call ended. Sloane turned toward the camera. For a split second, she looked directly at the lens, directly at Meredith, across time and circumstance. Her expression was calm, resolved, the expression of someone who had made peace with their choices. Then she walked away, down the stairs, into the rest of her life, into the plan she had been building for weeks. The room was very quiet. Harper had her hand pressed over her mouth. Her face was pale, stricken, the face of someone who had just watched a horror movie and realized it was actually a documentary. Detective Brennan was already on his phone, speaking in low, urgent tones. Words like premeditation and conspiracy and additional charges filtered through the silence. Lucia stood with her head bowed, hands folded in front of her, the posture of someone seeking forgiveness for delivering an unforgivable truth. She planned it, Meredith said. Her voice came from somewhere far away, disconnected from her body, disconnected from everything she had known and believed about her life. Weeks in advance, she called her mother and told her she was going to kill me. She discussed it casually, like she was planning a dinner party or a business meeting. It's premeditated, Detective Brennan confirmed. He had ended his call. His expression was grim, determined. This changes everything. This isn't assault anymore. This isn't attempted manslaughter. This is attempted murder in the first degree, planned and discussed with another party, conspiracy for both you and your unborn child. And Preston? Meredith's voice cracked on his name, the name of the man she had married, the name she had taken, the name she had given to the baby growing inside her, that other recording, the one where she talked about accidents, where she talked about pregnancies failing. He heard all of that. He didn't stop her. He just told her to wait, to be patient, to trust him. We're expanding the investigation immediately. Conspiracy charges are possible. Accessory before the fact. If we can prove he knew she was planning this and did nothing to stop it or warn you, he's culpable too. Meredith looked at Lucia, this woman she barely knew, this employee who had risked her job, her livelihood, her references, her future employment, all to do the right thing, all to save someone else. Why, she asked. You could have ignored it, kept your head down, collected your paycheck and pretended you didn't see anything. Why risk everything? Lucia's eyes were wet, but her voice was steady when she spoke. Because I have a daughter too, Mrs. Ashford. She's 22 years old now, just finished college, starting her life, and if anyone ever tried to hurt my future grandchildren. She shook her head, pressed her hand to her heart. Some things you can't look away from. Some things you have to stand up against, even when it costs you everything, even when it's hard, even when it's easier to stay silent. Harper moved to sit on the edge of the bed, took Meredith's hand, held on tight, the way she had when they first became friends, the way she had at Meredith's mother's funeral, the way she always did when the world was too much and Meredith needed someone to hold her together. What do you want to do? Meredith thought about her husband, the man she had loved with everything she had, the man she had built a life with, the man she had created a future with, the father of her unborn child. She thought about the way he said useful like it was a compliment, the way he discussed her like she was a problem to be managed, an inconvenience to be eliminated. an obstacle between him and the life he really wanted. She thought about Sloane, the smile after the push, the phone call planning her murder, the casual cruelty of stealing her clothes, her perfume, her life piece by piece, while Meredith remained oblivious, grateful even. Happy to have such an efficient assistant handling her husband's schedule. And she thought about her daughter, the baby growing inside her, the little fighter who survived a fall down 22 marble steps because her mother's body absorbed the impact. Who would grow up and ask questions and deserve answers? What did she want? She wanted the truth. She wanted justice. She wanted to burn it all down. I want a lawyer, Meredith said, the best divorce attorney in the city, someone who isn't afraid of the Ashford money or the Ashford name or the Ashford connections. And I want to make sure Sloane Whitmore spends the rest of her youth in prison regretting the day she touched me. Harper smiled. It was fierce, protective, triumphant. The smile of a woman who had been waiting years to watch her best friend wake up. I know exactly the right person. Grant Hollister's office smelled like leather and old money, and the particular confidence that came from winning cases other people thought were unwinnable. Mahogany desk polished to a mirror shine. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with legal volumes and awards and photos with important people. Degrees from Yale and Columbia framed on the walls in matching gold frames. A corner office on the 47th floor with a view of the entire city spread out below like something he owned. He was in his late 40s, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, the kind of man who looked like he had never lost a fight in his life and wasn't planning to start now. Mrs. Ashford, he gestured to the leather chair across from his desk. Please, make yourself comfortable. Can I get you anything? Water? Tea? Something stronger? Water is fine. Meredith lowered herself carefully into the chair, 8 months pregnant with a fractured wrist and ribs that ached every time she breathed. Moving was still an exercise in endurance, in remembering which positions hurt less than others. Harper hovered nearby, ready to help if needed, ready to catch her if she fell, the way she had been since the hospital, the way she probably always would be now. I've reviewed everything, Grant said once they were settled. The footage, the police reports, the preliminary findings from the criminal investigation, the additional recordings your housekeeper provided. He folded his hands on the desk. His expression was unreadable in that practiced way lawyers developed. I have to be honest with you. In 23 years of family law, I've never seen anything quite like this. Is that good or bad? For your case? Very good. For your husband and his mistress? Catastrophic. He slid a thick folder across the desk. This isn't just about divorce anymore, Mrs. Ashford. This is about criminal conspiracy, fraud, attempted murder. And if my suspicions are correct, we're also looking at significant financial crimes. Financial crimes? I've retained a forensic accountant, Margaret Chen. She's the best in the field, worked for the FBI for 15 years before going private. She's been looking into Ashford Technologies' books. He paused, let the silence build. Some irregularities have already emerged. Offshore accounts in the Caymans and Switzerland. Unusual transfers to shell companies that don't seem to do anything. Invoices for services that were never rendered. Expense reports for trips that never happened. Meredith processed this slowly. Her husband, the man who lectured her about household budgets and questioned every purchase over $500. Who made her feel guilty for buying new furniture for the nursery? Who told her they needed to be careful with money even as they lived in a 14-room mansion and flew on private jets? You think he's been stealing from his own company? I think there's much more to Preston Ashford than meets the eye, and I think the closer we look, the more we're going to find buried beneath that polished surface. Grant leaned back in his chair, steepled his fingers. The question is, how far do you want to take this? How deep do you want to dig? As far as it goes, as deep as it takes. Even if it destroys him completely? Even if it means his mother coming after you with everything the Ashford family has? Even if it means your daughter growing up knowing her father is in prison? Meredith thought about the footage, the recordings, the casual way Preston discussed her like she was a business asset to be liquidated when she was no longer useful. The silence when Sloane talked about accidents and failed pregnancies and women who fell downstairs. He made his choices, she said. All of them. every lie, every betrayal. Every time he looked me in the eye and told me he loved me while he was planning to discard me. Those were his choices. I'm just revealing them. Grant nodded. Something like approval flickered in his eyes, the look of a man who recognized a fighter when he saw one. Then let's begin. The next 3 weeks became a crash course in the dissolution of a marriage. Meredith learned that the mansion in the hills wasn't owned by both of them, as she had believed for 6 years. Preston had kept her name off the deed. For tax purposes, he had explained when they bought it. Simpler this way. You trust me, don't you? And she had. Of course she had. She had trusted him with everything. She learned that the prenup she had signed the night before their wedding, barely reading it because she was so in love and so certain they would be together forever, protected his pre-marriage assets completely. But she was entitled to half of everything accumulated during their 6 years of marriage, which, as it turned out, was substantial. Preston had not been idle during their years together. He had acquired properties she had never seen, investment portfolios she had never been told about, art collections stored in private vaults, all purchased with funds from their marital estate, all hidden in shell companies and trust structures that Meredith had never known existed. He's been preparing for this for years, Grant explained during one of their many meetings. Papers spread across the conference table, charts and graphs and evidence of deception, building escape routes, hiding assets, creating layers of protection between himself and accountability. The affair with Sloane isn't impulsive or emotional. It's strategic. She's been helping him structure the financial side of things since the beginning. So she's not just his mistress. She's his co-conspirator, his partner, has been from the very beginning, as far as I can tell. But Grant pulled out a timeline he had constructed, names and dates and connections spreading across the page like a spider's web. They met at a conference in Chicago 4 years before your wedding. She was working for a competing tech firm. Their relationship began then, if not earlier. Within 6 months of that conference, she was working as his executive assistant. Within a year, she was running parts of his operation that you never saw and never knew existed. Meredith sat with this information, let it settle into her bones like lead. The betrayal kept finding new depths, new levels of pain. Just when she thought she understood the full scope of it, another layer peeled back to reveal something worse underneath. "What about my mother's funeral?" she asked quietly. Grant's expression shifted, softened slightly, the first crack in his professional facade. "What do you mean?" "The footage from September, when I was in Denver burying my mother, saying goodbye to the woman who raised me. They were in my house, in my bedroom, in my bed." Her voice caught, cracked. "While I was standing at her grave, Sloane was wearing my mother's robe, using my mother's perfume, sleeping with my husband under my mother's quilt. I saw those recordings, yes. She wore my mother's necklace." The words came out flat, empty. But somewhere beneath the numbness, a white-hot rage was beginning to build. A furnace being stoked with coal that would never stop burning. "There's a clip from October 2nd. Sloane is going through my jewelry box. My jewelry box that my mother gave me when I turned 18. She tries on my mother's pearl necklace. The one Mom wore at her wedding to my father. The one she gave me the day before she died, when she could barely speak, when she held my hand and told me she loved me." Meredith's voice cracked completely. "Sloane held it up to her neck and said it would look better with her coloring." And Preston laughed. He laughed and said I would never notice, said I was too busy grieving to pay attention to anything. Harper made a small sound of fury, something between a growl and a sob. "And he was right," Meredith continued. "I didn't notice. I came home from burying my mother and nothing seemed wrong. Everything was exactly where I left it. He kissed me at the door and told me he was sorry for my loss and made me tea and held me while I cried, and I thought, at least I have him. At least I have this marriage. At least I'm not alone." The silence stretched, heavy, painful, suffocating. "This is the man I married," Meredith said finally. "This is who he's always been. I just didn't see it. I didn't want to see it. I loved the version of him I believed in so much that I blinded myself to the version that actually existed." She thought about their wedding day, 6 years ago in June, the garden ceremony she had dreamed about since she was a little girl. The dress her mother had helped her choose, the vows they had written themselves, promising forever, promising loyalty, promising to love each other through everything. Preston had seemed like everything she had ever wanted, successful but not arrogant, charming but not superficial, attentive but not smothering. He had pursued her with such focus, such determination, making her feel chosen, special, like the heroine of her own love story. Looking back now, she could see the signs, the tiny red flags she had dismissed or explained away, the way he had isolated her from friends, subtly, gradually, making small comments about how this one was jealous of her success. That one was a bad influence. The other one was taking up too much of her time, until her social circle had shrunk to almost nothing and she was dependent on him for everything. The way he had managed their finances, taking control while telling her she didn't have a head for numbers, making her ask for money, making her justify every purchase, making her feel guilty for wanting things. The way he had made decisions for both of them and framed it as taking care of her, where they lived, what they ate, when they saw friends, how they spent their time, always his preferences, always his choices, always presented as what was best for them both. She had mistaken control for love, possession for passion, manipulation for care. "I should have listened to Louise," she said. "Your sister? We haven't spoken in 4 years. She tried to warn me before the wedding. She came to my apartment 3 days before I was supposed to walk down the aisle and she begged me not to do it. She said Preston was wrong for me, too controlling, too ambitious, too focused on what he wanted to the exclusion of everything else." Meredith laughed bitterly. The sound scraped against her throat. "She said I was disappearing into him, losing myself piece by piece, becoming a reflection of what he wanted instead of who I actually was. What happened? I told her she was jealous, jealous of my success, jealous of my happiness, jealous that I had found love and she was still alone. The shame of that memory burned. We had a terrible fight. I said things I can never take back, and I chose him over my own sister, over the only family I had left after our father died. Have you thought about reaching out to her? I've thought about it every day since I saw that footage. But what would I say? You were right, I was wrong, my husband's mistress tried to kill me and my baby?" She shook her head. "I need to get through this first. I need to be strong enough to admit how wrong I was. Strong enough to face her knowing she saw what I couldn't see." The meeting ended with plans, strategies, timelines. Grant explained the process in careful detail. Separation paperwork, asset discovery, depositions and motions in the intersection with the criminal case. It would be long, complicated, emotionally exhausting. A marathon, not a sprint. But they would win. He was certain of that. "The evidence is overwhelming," he said as Meredith stood to leave, supporting herself on Harper's arm, her body protesting every movement. Between the footage, the financial records, and the criminal charges, Preston Ashford is going to lose everything he values: his reputation, his company, his freedom, possibly if the fraud allegations pan out. Grant paused. Let the weight of his words settle. The question isn't if we win, it's how completely we destroy him in the process. Meredith didn't feel victorious as she left his office. She felt hollow, gutted, like someone had reached inside her and scooped out everything she thought she knew about her life and left only empty space behind. Harper drove her back to the small apartment they had been staying in, not the mansion. Meredith couldn't go back there, couldn't walk through those rooms knowing what had happened in them, what was still happening in them. Every surface contaminated by memories that were no longer real. That night, she couldn't sleep. She sat in the dark living room with her laptop open, the blue glow illuminating her face, the cursor blinking on a search page like a heartbeat. She typed, "Signs of emotional abuse in marriage." The results filled the screen. Checklists, articles, personal stories from other women who had lived through what she was living through now. She read them all, hour after hour, recognizing herself in every paragraph. Isolation from friends and family? Check. Financial control and restriction? Check. Gaslighting and making you doubt your own reality. Check. Making you feel crazy for noticing things that were actually happening. Check. The charming public persona that disappeared completely behind closed doors. Check. Love bombing followed by withdrawal of affection as punishment. Check. She'd been living in a carefully constructed prison, and she hadn't even known the bars were there. She had thought she was free, thought she was loved, thought she was building a life. All along, she had just been building her own cage. At 3 in the morning, she typed something else. How to know if you were being gaslit? The answer was devastatingly simple. If you constantly questioned your own perception of reality, if you apologized for things that weren't your fault, if you felt confused and destabilized all the time, if you had lost trust in your own judgment, if you couldn't make decisions without approval, if you felt like you were going crazy, Meredith had done all of those things for years. Every time she had felt something was wrong with Preston, every time her instincts screamed at her, every time a small voice in the back of her mind whispered that this wasn't right, she had talked herself out of it, dismissed it as paranoia, insecurity, hormones, the irrational fears of a woman who didn't appreciate how good she had it. She hadn't been paranoid. She hadn't been irrational. She had been right. Her instincts had been trying to save her all along, and she had silenced them again and again because she loved a man who didn't exist. The realization was devastating and liberating and terrifying all at once. Her baby kicked, strong, insistent, as if reminding her she wasn't alone, that whatever came next, they were in it together, that there was still something worth fighting for. I know, little one, Meredith whispered, her hand pressed against her belly, feeling that movement, that life, that future. I know I'm going to figure this out, for both of us, I promise. She closed the laptop, sat in the darkness, let herself feel everything she had been pushing away. The grief for the marriage she thought she had, the anger at the man who had deceived her, the fear of what came next, the shame of having been fooled so completely, the loneliness of having lost everything familiar, and underneath it all, pushing up like a flower through concrete, a tiny, stubborn spark of hope that refused to die. Somewhere in the city, Preston was sleeping in the bed they had shared, with the woman who had tried to kill her, in the house built on lies. Let him have it, Meredith thought. She was going to build something better. The forensic evidence kept mounting. Every day, Margaret Chan uncovered something new. And another shell company, another offshore account, another paper trail leading to money that should have been in their marital accounts and somehow wasn't. He's been doing this for at least a decade, Margaret explained during one of their strategy sessions, her laptop open, spreadsheets glowing. Before you even met him, it's systematic, methodical. He moves money in small increments to avoid detection, creates invoices for consulting services that were never performed, pays bonuses to employees who don't exist. How much are we talking about? So far, approximately $47 million that can't be accounted for, and I've only scratched the surface. Margaret pushed her glasses up her nose. Your husband isn't just cheating on you, Mrs. Ashford. He's cheating everyone. His partners, his shareholders, his employees, the IRS. Meredith absorbed this information like she had absorbed everything else over the past few weeks, with a numbness that was starting to feel permanent, like a part of her had died in that fall and she was still learning to live without it. What happens when you report this? The SEC will get involved, the FBI probably. Financial crimes of this magnitude don't go unnoticed once they're exposed. Margaret's expression was carefully neutral. It's likely to take years to fully untangle, but the result will be the same. Prison time. Significant prison time. Prison, her husband in prison, the father of her child in an orange jumpsuit behind bars. Meredith waited to feel something, satisfaction, vindication, even grief. Nothing came. Keep digging, she said. Preston's mother arrived 3 days later. Vivian Ashford was 65 years old, silver-haired, and draped in the kind of quiet wealth that didn't need to announce itself. Chanel suit, Hermes scarf, pearls that had been in the family for 4 generations. She moved through the world like someone who owned it, because in many ways she did. She showed up at Harper's apartment without calling first, without warning. Just appeared in the doorway like a summons from another world. Meredith, her voice was cool, perfectly modulated, the voice of a woman who had never raised it in her life because she had never needed to. We need to talk. Meredith was 8.5 months pregnant, covered in fading bruises, with a cast on her wrist that wouldn't come off for another month. She was wearing sweatpants and one of Harper's old college t-shirts. She hadn't washed her hair in 2 days. She looked exactly like a woman who had been through hell and was still there. Vivian looked at her with something between pity and disdain. The look of a woman who had never been vulnerable in her life, contemplating someone who was nothing but. "May I come in?" No. The word surprised both of them. Meredith had never refused Vivian anything. Not once in 6 years of marriage to her son. Vivian Ashford was a force of nature, a matriarch who expected obedience and generally received it. People didn't say no to her. They certainly didn't say no while wearing sweatpants and standing in the doorway of a cramped apartment. "I've come to make you an offer," Vivian said. Her tone suggested this was generous, a gift she was bestowing, a kindness she didn't have to extend. "Walk away from all of this, the divorce proceedings, the criminal investigation, the forensic accounting, all of it. You'll receive $2 million, a clean break, no scandal, no publicity, no dragged-out legal battles. And in return, you sign a non-disclosure agreement, comprehensive, permanent. You decline to testify against Sloan. You tell the police you don't remember what happened that day. Memory is so unreliable after head trauma, wouldn't you agree?" Vivian's smile was thin, sharp, like a blade covered in silk. "You take the money, you have your baby. You build a new life somewhere far from here, and we never speak of this unpleasantness again. Everyone wins." Meredith leaned against the doorframe. Her body ached. Her heart ached more, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "Does Preston know you're here?" Preston is being foolish, emotional, thinking with parts of himself other than his brain, as men so often do. He's not considering the family's reputation, the Ashford name, what this will do to the company his great-grandfather built. Vivian stepped closer. Her perfume was expensive, overwhelming, cloying. "I'm trying to help you, Meredith. Truly. $2 million is more than you would ever get in a divorce settlement. More than you could earn in 20 years of working. More than you'll ever need. Take it. Disappear. Let this whole ugly business fade away like a bad dream. Your son's mistress pushed me down 22 marble steps. An accident. A moment of passion. These things happen between women fighting over a man. She tried to kill my baby. Your grandchild. The child is fine. You're fine. No permanent damage was done." Vivian waved her hand dismissively, as if attempted murder was a minor inconvenience, a social faux pas rather than a crime. "Let's not make this bigger than it needs to be. I have video footage of her pushing me, audio of her planning it weeks in advance, evidence of her discussing it with her own mother. Footage can be manipulated. Experts can be hired to say whatever we need them to say. A good lawyer can make this very complicated for you, very expensive, very drawn out." Vivian's voice hardened, the silk falling away to reveal the steel underneath. "You don't want to fight the Ashford family, Meredith. We have resources you can't begin to imagine. We can make this process very, very difficult. We can tie you up in court for years, drain every penny you have, make sure no one in this city will hire you or rent to you or associate with you. Is that what you want for yourself? For your child? Are you threatening me? I'm offering you a way out, a generous one, the only one you're going to get." She reached into her Hermes bag, pulled out a check, pre-signed, pre-dated, $2 million, made out in Meredith's name. "Take it, walk away. This is the best decision for everyone, including your daughter." Meredith looked at the check. $2 million, more money than she had ever seen. More than she had ever dreamed of having, enough to buy a house, start a business, send her daughter to the best schools, build a life free from want or worry. All she had to do was let Sloan walk free, let Preston escape consequences, let the Ashford family rewrite history so that she became the unstable pregnant woman who fell down the stairs and they became the victims of her delusions. You know what I keep thinking about? Meredith said quietly. Vivian waited, confident, certain. The check still extended toward Meredith like an offering. The nanny cam, we installed it for the baby, to watch the nursery, to make sure she would be safe when we couldn't be in the room with her. She looked up, met Vivian's eyes. Your son put that camera there to protect our daughter, and it ended up capturing the woman he's been having an affair with, pushing me to my death while she whispered, "Oops." A pause. That's irony, isn't it? Or maybe it's justice. I can't decide which. Meredith, be reasonable. Think about what you're doing. Your daughter-in-law is standing in front of you with a broken wrist and bruises on her body and a baby that almost died. And you're asking me to be reasonable. Meredith's voice was steady now, cold, forged in the fire of everything she had learned and everything she had lost. No, I'm not taking your money. I'm not signing anything. I'm not helping you protect your son's reputation while he protects the woman who tried to murder me. You'll regret this, I promise you that. Maybe, but I'll be able to look my daughter in the eye and tell her I did the right thing. That I stood up for us when no one else would. That I didn't sell our dignity for money. She stepped back, began closing the door. Goodbye, Vivian. The next time we speak, it will be through lawyers. The door clicked shut. Meredith stood there for a long moment, shaking, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat, her wrist throbbing where she had gripped the doorframe too tight. Harper appeared from the kitchen. She had heard everything through the thin walls. Her expression was equal parts proud and worried. That was, wow. I know. $2 million, Mary. I know. And you just closed the door in her face. Meredith laughed. It was a strange sound, almost hysterical. But underneath the hysteria, something else, something stronger. I did, didn't I? You absolutely did. Harper pulled her into a careful hug, mindful of the bruises, the belly, the fragile state of everything. I've been waiting 6 years to see that woman put in her place. 6 years of watching her look down her nose at you, criticize your clothes, your career, your cooking, your everything. She's going to make things difficult. She meant what she said. She was always going to make things difficult. At least now you know where you stand. At least now you're fighting back instead of trying to keep the peace. That night, Meredith made a phone call she had been putting off for 4 years. The phone rang 3 times. 4, 5. She was about to hang up, about to convince herself it was a sign, when someone answered. Hello? The voice was cautious, unfamiliar after so much time. Then recognition dawned, sharp, sudden. Meredith? Hi, Louise. Silence stretched across 400 miles and 4 years of estrangement, 4 years of missed birthdays and holidays and all the small moments that make up a life. 4 years of pride and stubbornness in words that couldn't be taken back. I saw the news, Louise finally said. The arrest, the assault charges. I've been watching the coverage every day, waiting for you to call, hoping you would call. I should have called sooner. Yes, you should have. A pause, heavy with everything that wasn't being said. Are you okay? The baby? We're alive, both of us. That's more than I expected a month ago. Meredith's voice cracked, broke, shattered completely. Louise, you were right about everything, about him, about the marriage, about all of it. You tried to tell me, and I wouldn't listen, and I said terrible things, and I chose him over you, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed you to know that I know now. I finally know. The words tumbled out. 4 years of regret compressed into a few sentences. 4 years of guilt and shame and missing her sister every single day, but being too proud to pick up the phone. Louise was quiet for a long moment. Meredith counted her heartbeats, waited for anger, for rejection, for I told you so. I'm already on a flight, Louise finally said. I land at 8 tomorrow morning. Just tell me where to find you. Meredith gave her Harper's address, hung up the phone, sat in the darkness and cried. Not from sadness this time. Not from grief or fear or pain, from relief. Louise arrived the next morning with a suitcase, a laptop bag, and a determination that Meredith remembered from their childhood. The look that meant she was going to fix something, no matter what it took. "You look like hell," Louise said by way of greeting. Then she pulled Meredith into a hug that lasted a long time. "I'm so sorry I wasn't here sooner. I should have fought harder. Should have made you listen. I wasn't ready to hear it. I wasn't ready to see what was right in front of me." "I know." Louise pulled back, studied her sister's face. "But you see it now. That's what matters. That's what we work with." They talked for hours about everything that had happened, about everything that was going to happen, about the trial and the divorce and the evidence in the future. "I'm a lawyer now," Louise said. "Did you know that? I finished law school, passed the bar, started my own practice in Denver. Family law mostly, helping people just like you get out of marriages just like yours." "You did?" "I did. All those years of not speaking. I had to do something with all that anger, all that energy." Louise smiled, sad, knowing. Helping other people leave their terrible husbands seemed like a decent way to channel it. "I'm proud of you. I know I don't have the right to be, but I am." "You have every right. You're my sister." That never stopped being true, even when we weren't talking. Louise had also brought Margaret Chen, the forensic accountant, who had more to show them. More shell companies, more hidden accounts, more evidence of a decade of fraud. "This goes deeper than just personal enrichment," Margaret explained. "Your husband has been using company funds to pay off regulators, bribing officials to approve permits for development projects, funneling money to politicians in exchange for favorable legislation." She spread documents across the table. "He's not just a cheater, Mrs. Ashford. He's a criminal, on a scale that's almost impressive if it weren't so disgusting." Meredith looked at the papers, the bank statements, the email chains, the paper trail of her husband's betrayal. "All those years he told me I didn't understand finances, that I shouldn't worry about money, that he would take care of everything." She laughed bitterly. "He was stealing from everyone and he made me feel guilty for buying new shoes." "Classic financial abuse," Louise said. "Keep you dependent, keep you ignorant, keep you so focused on small things that you never see the big picture. Make sure you can't leave because you don't even know where the money is or how to access it." "I thought he was protecting me, sheltering me. I thought it was love. That's what he wanted you to think. That's how it works." Malcolm Foster reached out 2 days later, Preston's former business partner, the man Preston had pushed out of the company 3 years ago in a boardroom coup that Meredith had witnessed but not understood. They met at a coffee shop downtown. Malcolm was in his mid-40s, salt and pepper hair, tired eyes. He looked like a man who had been carrying a heavy burden for far too long and was finally finding people strong enough to share it. "I tried to warn people," he said, his hands wrapped around his coffee cup like it was a lifeline. "When I first noticed the irregularities in the books, the offshore transfers, the fake invoices, I went to the board, showed them everything I had found." What happened? They didn't believe me. Preston had them all convinced I was the problem. Bitter, jealous, trying to sabotage him because he was more successful than me. Malcolm's jaw tightened. He told them I was having personal problems, that I was drinking, that I had made bad investments and was looking for someone to blame. He destroyed my credibility completely. I'm sorry. He destroyed more than my credibility. He destroyed my marriage. My wife left me. She believed him over me, believed I was lying about the fraud because I couldn't handle being second best. His voice cracked. "I've been alone for 3 years, watching from the outside while he got richer and more powerful, watching him alarm and steal and charm everyone into believing he was some kind of visionary genius. Why didn't you go to the authorities?" "I tried, but I didn't have enough evidence, just suspicions, fragments, things that I'd noticed but couldn't prove." He reached into his briefcase, pulled out a thick manila envelope. "So I've been gathering, documenting, waiting for someone else to see what I saw, someone with more credibility than a disgraced former partner." He slid the envelope across the table, heavy with papers, with proof, with years of patient, determined work. "Everything I've collected over the past 3 years, bank records, email exchanges, meeting notes I shouldn't have kept copies of, internal memos that someone forgot to shred. He met her eyes. I couldn't do anything with it alone. One crazy ex-partner making accusations no one believes. But with your footage, your lawyer, your willingness to fight, your wife of the accused credibility. He paused. Maybe now we can finally bring him down. Meredith took the envelope, felt the weight of it in her hands. 3 years of one man's struggle against a system designed to protect men like Preston. Why help me? She asked. You don't know me. You have no reason to trust me. For all you know, I'm loyal to my husband, and this is some kind of trap. Because I have a daughter, too. Malcolm's voice was rough, emotional, the armor of professionalism cracking. She's 20 years old now, just finished college, and she still believes her father is a failure, a liar, a man who couldn't accept losing and made up stories to make himself feel better. He swallowed hard. I want her to know the truth. I want her to know I was right all along. I want her to know her father isn't what everyone says he is. Meredith understood that. The desperate need to be believed. To have your reality validated after years of being told you were wrong. To look someone in the eye and have them say, yes, I see it too. Then let's make sure she knows, she said. Let's make sure everyone knows. That evening, sitting in Harper's small apartment, surrounded by evidence and allies and the wreckage of her marriage, Meredith felt something shift inside her. The grief was still there. The anger, the fear, all of it still churning beneath the surface, still threatening to pull her under. But underneath it all, something new was growing. Resolve, purpose, direction. She placed her hand on her belly. Her daughter kicked, strong, insistent, demanding attention the way she always did. We're going to be okay, Meredith whispered. Both of us, I promise. For the first time since the fall, she actually believed it. The criminal case against Sloan Whitmore moved faster than anyone expected. The enhanced audio from the nanny cam. The phone call recording where she discussed making sure Meredith had an accident. The testimony from Lucia about threats she had overheard. All of it painted a picture that no amount of expensive lawyers could obscure. Premeditated attempted murder of a pregnant woman by the mistress of her husband. The media loved it. Headlines screamed across every platform, every news channel, every gossip site and tabloid and social media feed in the country. Tech mogul's mistress charged with attempted murder. Nanny cam catches shocking assault in mansion. The woman behind the stairs, inside the triangle that turned deadly. Meredith refused all interview requests, dozens of them, hundreds. Every morning brought new emails, new phone calls, new reporters camped outside Harper's building hoping for a glimpse of the pregnant woman at the center of the scandal. She let her lawyer speak for her, let the evidence speak for itself. She had no interest in becoming a spectacle, a curiosity, a cautionary tale to be dissected and analyzed and judged by people who had never met her. But Sloan had other plans. She's going to testify, Grant told her during one of their strategy sessions. Her lawyer has informed the court she wants to take the stand in her own defense. They're going for sympathy, the vulnerable young woman manipulated by a powerful older man, the victim of circumstance who panicked in a moment of stress. She planned it for weeks. She talked about it on a recorded phone call with her mother. They'll claim the call was taken out of context, that she was venting frustration, not actually planning violence, that she never intended to follow through, that what happened on the stairs was a moment of temporary insanity, not premeditated murder. Grant's expression was grim. It's a Hail Mary defense, desperate, unlikely to succeed. But sometimes juries respond to a pretty face telling a sad story. And Preston? He's been subpoenaed as a witness for the prosecution. They want him to testify about the nature of his relationship with Sloan, about what he knew and when he knew it, about conversations they had regarding you. Will he tell the truth? He'll tell whatever version of the truth protects him most, whatever story casts him as the innocent bystander rather than the accomplice. Grant leaned back in his chair. Which is why we need to be prepared for anything, every twist, every lie, every attempt to shift blame. The trial began on a cold Tuesday in November. Meredith sat in the front row of the gallery, 9 months pregnant now, her belly straining against the fabric of the maternity dress Louise had helped her pick out. Something dignified, something that said victim, not vindictive, something that would photograph well for the cameras that would be analyzing every frame of footage from this courtroom. Harper flanked her on one side, Louise on the other, both of them armed with tissues and water bottles and the fierce protectiveness of women defending someone they loved. Meredith's due date was 2 weeks away. Dr. Brennan had advised against the stress of a trial, had warned that the emotional strain could trigger early labor, had suggested watching from home, following the proceedings on television. She came anyway. She needed to see this through, needed to watch justice unfold, needed to look Sloan Whitmore in the eye and let her know that she had survived, that she was still standing, that 22 marble steps weren't enough to break her. Sloan entered the courtroom in a pale blue dress, conservative, modest, a designer piece that had been carefully chosen to convey innocence. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her makeup was minimal, natural, the look of a woman who cried herself to sleep every night over a terrible mistake. Nothing like the woman in the footage who had smiled after pushing a pregnant woman down the stairs. Nothing like the woman on the phone call who had discussed making sure accidents happened. The jury consisted of 7 women and 5 men. Ordinary people pulled from their ordinary lives to decide the fate of a woman who had committed an extraordinary crime. Teachers, accountants, small business owners, parents. They would determine whether Sloan Whitmore spent the next decade in prison or walked free. The prosecution opened with the footage. The lights dimmed, the screen filled with the grainy black and white image of Meredith at the top of the stairs, her hand on the railing, her phone in her other hand. Just a woman standing in her own home, not knowing these were the last seconds of the life she had known. The entire courtroom watched what happened next. Sloan's appearance, the approach, the push, the tumble down 22 steps, the sickening bounce of a pregnant woman's body against marble, the sound of her skull connecting with the floor, and then Sloan's face. That smile, that satisfied, triumphant smile before the mask of horror descended. One juror, a middle-aged woman with gray streaks in her hair, actually gasped, put her hand over her mouth, looked away. Another juror, a young man in glasses who worked at a bank, turned pale. His hands gripped the armrests of his chair like he was trying to hold himself in place. Then came the enhanced audio. The courtroom was absolutely silent as the speakers played Sloan's whispered word. Oops, soft, clear, unmistakable. The sound of a woman who had gotten exactly what she wanted. The phone call recording followed. Sloan's voice, discussing accidents, discussing how pregnant women fall all the time, discussing her intention to become Mrs. Ashford one way or another. The casual, matter-of-fact tone of someone planning a murder, like they were planning a dinner party. By the end of the first day of testimony, Meredith could see it on the jury's faces. The shock, the disgust, the dawning realization of what they were dealing with. Sloan's lawyer tried to recover during cross-examination, questioned the audio expert about enhancement techniques, suggested the recordings might have been doctored or manipulated, pointed out that the quality was poor, the interpretations subjective, the conclusions uncertain. But the footage didn't lie. The push was there. The smile was there. The word oops was there, and all the expensive lawyers in the world couldn't make them disappear. Day 2 brought the medical testimony. Dr. Brennan took the stand in her white coat, projecting authority and expertise. She detailed Meredith's injuries with clinical precision, the concussion and its lasting effects, the fractured wrist that would require months of physical therapy, the bruises that had taken weeks to fade, the miracle of the baby's survival. In your medical opinion, the prosecutor asked, could this fall have been fatal? Absolutely, without question. Falls from that height, at that velocity, with that type of impact, frequently result in death. The statistics are clear. A 22-step fall onto marble has a mortality rate of approximately 60%. Dr. Brennan paused. Let that number sink in. The fact that Mrs. Ashford survived with the injuries she did is remarkable. The fact that her pregnancy survived is nearly unprecedented. In my 30 years of practice, I've never seen anyone walk away from that kind of fall with both mother and child intact. Can you explain how that happened? The way she fell. Somehow, despite the speed and the chaos, Mrs. Ashford managed to protect her abdomen throughout the fall. She took the impacts on her shoulder, her hip, her wrist, her head. Every part of her body absorbed damage so that her baby didn't have to. Dr. Brennan's voice softened. It was maternal instinct in its purest form. She protected her child even when she couldn't protect herself. The defense attorney had no questions for the doctor. Day 3 was Lucia's testimony. The housekeeper took the stand in her best dress, a modest navy blue she had worn to her own daughter's college graduation. She clutched her purse in her lap like a shield. Her accent grew stronger as her nerves mounted, but her voice was steady as she recounted what she had witnessed, what she had recorded, what she had saved. "Why did you preserve the footage?" the prosecutor asked. "Because I knew what I had seen was wrong. When I found Mrs. Ashford at the bottom of those stairs, when I saw the blood and the way her body was lying, and I thought she was dead." Lucia paused, took a breath. "I knew someone had done this to her. The way she was lying, the angle, it wasn't a fall, it was a push. And I knew if I didn't save the evidence, if I didn't protect the truth, it would disappear. These people have money, power. They make things disappear. What made you so certain it wasn't an accident?" "I have cleaned many houses, sir. I have seen many accidents. People who slip, people who trip, people who fall downstairs because they are old or clumsy or not paying attention." She shook her head. "This was not an accident. I saw her face, Mrs. Whitmore's face, when she came down the stairs, before she started screaming, before she called for help. There was a smile, a real smile, like someone who just won a prize." The defense attorney approached for cross-examination, confident, aggressive, ready to destroy this witness's credibility. "Ms. Rodriguez, you were terminated from your position shortly after providing this evidence to police, weren't you?" "Yes." "So you might have reason to be angry at the Ashford family, to want revenge for losing your job." "I might have reason to be angry, yes, but I didn't make up those recordings. I didn't push Mrs. Ashford down the stairs. I didn't make Ms. Whitmore smile afterward." Lucia met the attorney's eyes steadily. "I just saved what the camera captured. The camera doesn't lie. How do we know you didn't manipulate the footage, edit it to make my client look guilty?" Lucia blinked, actually laughed a little. "Because I don't know how to do that, sir. I'm a housekeeper, not a computer person. My daughter had to show me how to send email. I did plug a USB drive into the system and press copy. That's all I did. That's all I know how to do." The jury nodded. Several of them were looking at Lucia with something like admiration now. The defense attorney sat down without further questions. Day 4 was Preston's testimony. He took the stand in a $3,000 suit, looking like the wealthy executive he was, confident, polished. A man used to controlling every room he entered, used to charming everyone he met, used to lying and being believed. The prosecutor didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Mr. Ashford, how long have you been having an affair with the defendant?" Preston's jaw tightened, barely perceptible. "Approximately 2 years." "And were you aware of Mrs. Whitmore's feelings toward your wife, with you?" "I knew Sloane was, impatient, frustrated with our situation. But I never imagined she would do anything violent. She's not a violent person." "Never imagined, even after the conversations you had where she discussed your wife having accidents?" A pause. Too long. Preston's eyes flickered to Sloane, then away. Quick. Guilty. "There may have been some conversations along those lines. Casual, joking, the way people say things they don't mean when they're frustrated. I never took them seriously." "Joking about your pregnant wife falling downstairs?" Sloane has a dark sense of humor. I didn't think she meant anything by it. I didn't think she was actually planning anything. The prosecutor pulled out a transcript, read directly from it. "Mr. Ashford, I'm going to read from a recording dated September 15th. In this recording, Ms. Whitmore says, quote, 'The pregnancy complicates things.' And you respond by saying you tried to convince your wife to wait. She then suggests that, quote, 'Pregnancies fail all the time. Accidents happen.' She implies that a fall or a miscarriage might solve your problems." The prosecutor looked up from the paper. "And your response was, quote, 'Let's not go there.'" Silence in the courtroom. "Let's not go there." Not, "That's insane, no." Now, I would never let anything happen to my wife. Not, we need to call the police. Just, let's not go there. As if murder was an option you were declining, not an atrocity you were condemning. Preston's face had gone pale beneath his country club tan. I was trying to discourage her, to change the subject, to move on to other things. By suggesting she wait rather than telling her the idea was monstrous, you're twisting my words, taking them out of context. I'm reading them verbatim, Mr. Ashford, word for word from a recording made in your own home. The cross-examination was brutal. The defense attorney tried to rehabilitate Preston, to paint him as another victim of Sloane's manipulation. But the damage was done. The jury had heard him, had seen the recordings, had watched him fail to condemn the murder of his pregnant wife while it was being discussed in front of him. By the time Preston stepped down, any sympathy the jury might have had for him was gone. Day 5 was Sloane's testimony. She took the stand in tears, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, speaking in a small, vulnerable voice that trembled with emotion. The transformation from the woman in the footage was remarkable. Complete, a performance worthy of an award. I never meant to push her, Sloane said, her voice breaking on the words. I was trying to talk to her, to explain, to apologize for what was happening between Preston and me. She turned around suddenly and lost her balance. I reached out to catch her, but I was too late. It all happened so fast. 1 second she was there, the next she was falling. And the word oops captured on the audio, I was in shock, complete shock. I didn't know what I was saying. It just came out, a noise, a sound. It wasn't what it sounded like. And the phone call where you discussed making sure she had an accident, I was venting to my mother. Everyone says things they don't mean when they're frustrated, when they're hurt, when they feel trapped. More tears, more dabbing. I never intended to actually hurt anyone. I loved Preston. I just wanted to be with him. I never wanted anyone to get hurt. And the smile on the footage after she fell, Sloane's lip trembled perfectly. I don't remember smiling. I was horrified, terrified. Maybe it looked like a smile, but it wasn't. It was, I don't know, shock, panic. Everyone processes fear differently. Everyone's face does different things. The prosecutor approached the witness stand, calm, deliberate. I'd like to play the footage one more time for the jury. The screen lit up again. The courtroom watched again. Meredith falling, tumbling, landing in a heap at the bottom of the stairs. Then Sloane's face filling the frame. The unmistakable curve of her lips. The satisfaction in her eyes. The way she watched for a long moment before the mask of horror descended. Miss Whitmore, you're asking this jury to believe that smile was panic? Sloane's composure cracked. Just for a moment. A flash of something hard and angry beneath the tears. You don't understand what it was like. 2 years of waiting, 2 years of promises, 2 years of being told soon, just a little longer, just be patient. Her voice changed, hardened. She had everything I wanted, the house, the name, the husband, everything I had been promised for 20 years, and she didn't even appreciate it. She didn't even see it. She was so oblivious, so trusting, following him around like a lost puppy, believing everything he told her. It was pathetic to watch. The courtroom went absolutely silent. Sloane seemed to realize what she had said. Her eyes widened. She looked at her lawyer, who had his head in his hands. I didn't mean that the way it sounded. I just meant I was frustrated, emotional. No further questions, the prosecutor said. It was too late. The jury had heard her. The real Sloane Whitmore. The one behind the tears and the pretty face in the sad story. The one who had pushed a pregnant woman down the stairs and whispered oops as she fell. Closing arguments came next. The prosecution methodical. The defense desperate. Neither mattered much. The damage was done. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Meredith sat in the hallway outside the courtroom, her hands folded over her belly. Harper beside her, holding a cup of cold coffee she hadn't touched. Louise pacing near the windows, checking her phone every few minutes. Grant Hollister leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Short deliberation, he said, usually a good sign for the prosecution. What does that mean for us? It means they didn't have much to debate. The evidence was overwhelming. Sloane's testimony hurt her more than anything the prosecution presented. He paused. I wouldn't be surprised if we get conviction on all counts. The bailiff appeared in the doorway. They're ready. The walk back into the courtroom felt like walking through water. Heavy, slow, every step an effort. Meredith settled into her seat, her heart pounding against her ribs, the baby kicking as if she could feel her mother's anxiety. Sloane was already at the defense table. Her composure was back in place, but it was brittle now, fragile, like glass about to shatter. The jury filed in. Meredith watched their faces, looking for clues, looking for any sign of what they had decided. Their expressions were carefully neutral, professional. The foreperson stood, a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and sharp eyes that had watched everything with careful attention. On the count of assault with intent to cause bodily harm, we find the defendant guilty. A ripple went through the courtroom. Meredith heard Harper exhale beside her. On the count of attempted murder in the first degree against Meredith Ashford, we find the defendant guilty. Sloane made a sound, small, strangled. Her lawyer gripped her arm. On the count of attempted murder in the first degree against the unborn child of Meredith Ashford, we find the defendant guilty. 3 guilty verdicts, 3 counts. Sloane Whitmore was going to prison. The judge thanked the jury, set a sentencing date for 3 weeks out. The courtroom erupted in noise, reporters scrambling for the doors, lawyers gathering papers, spectators turning to each other with shocked whispers. Meredith sat very still. It was over. The trial was over. Justice had been served. But she didn't feel victorious. She felt hollow, exhausted, like she had been running for months and had finally crossed the finish line, only to discover there was nothing on the other side. Mary? Harper touched her arm. You okay? I don't know, she admitted. I thought I would feel different, happier, more satisfied. You're about to have a baby. You're allowed to feel complicated things. Outside the courthouse, the sun was setting, pink and gold streaking across the sky like a painting. The world going on as it always did, indifferent to the drama that had unfolded inside these walls. Meredith thought about Sloane, sitting in that courtroom, watching her life collapse around her. The 8 to 10 years she would likely serve. The career destroyed, the reputation ruined. The dreams of becoming Mrs. Preston Ashford turned to ash. And she thought about Preston, watching from the gallery as his mistress was convicted, as his secrets were exposed, as everything he had built came crashing down. Was this justice? It felt like it should be, but it also felt like grief, like mourning, like saying goodbye to something that had never really existed in the first place. The car pulled up to take her home. Meredith climbed into the back seat, her belly making every movement awkward. The door closed and the noise of the courthouse faded. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. You think this is over? It's not. I will appeal. I will fight. And when I get out, I will find you. Sloane, somehow still texting from custody. Meredith stared at the message for a long moment. Let the words sink in. Let the threat register. Then she blocked the number, deleted the text, set her phone aside. Who was that? Harper asked. No one important, not anymore. That night, Meredith's water broke. She was sitting in Harper's kitchen, eating leftover pizza, and listening to Louise argue with Grant Hollister on the phone about the divorce proceedings. One moment she was fine. The next, warmth between her legs and a tightening sensation in her lower back that she recognized from the birthing classes she had taken alone because Preston was always too busy. I think the baby's coming, she said quietly. The room exploded into controlled chaos. 12 hours later, in a delivery room surrounded by Harper and Louise and a team of nurses who had heard her story and treated her like a hero, Eleanor Meredith Ashford was born. 7 pounds, 4 ounces, 10 perfect fingers, 10 perfect toes, a shock of dark hair and eyes that couldn't decide between blue and gray. Perfect, healthy, alive. Meredith held her daughter for the first time and felt something crack open inside her chest. All the grief, all the anger, all the fear and pain and loss. It didn't disappear. It was still there, woven into the fabric of who she was now, who she would always be. But underneath it, pushing up like a flower through concrete, was something else. Love. Pure, overwhelming, terrifying in its intensity. "Hi, Eleanor," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I've been waiting so long to meet you." The baby yawned, stretched her tiny fingers, made a small sound that might have been contentment. "You're named after a judge," Meredith continued, "a woman who saw me clearly when I couldn't see myself. I hope you grow up to see clearly, too, to see the truth even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." Harper and Louise stood in the doorway, crying, smiling, holding each other. "She's beautiful," Harper said. "She's a fighter," Louise added, "just like her mother." Meredith looked down at her daughter, this tiny miracle who had survived a fall that should have killed them both, who had held on through weeks of stress and fear and uncertainty, who had chosen to be born on the day her mother finally found justice. A fighter. Yes, that was exactly what she was, and that was exactly what Meredith was going to teach her to be. 3 months after Eleanor was born, the divorce was finalized. Meredith sat in Grant Hollister's office, the baby sleeping peacefully in a carrier beside her chair. Papers spread across the mahogany desk. Numbers and assets and percentages, the arithmetic of a marriage's end. "The federal investigation into Preston's finances has expanded significantly," Grant said. "Charges are expected within the month. The SEC has gotten involved, and the FBI has a forensic team going through his servers. Between the embezzlement, the tax fraud, the bribery, and the conspiracy charges, he's looking at 15 to 20 years minimum." "Good. The divorce settlement gives you primary custody of Eleanor, full ownership of the properties you're legally entitled to under the prenup, a significant portion of the marital assets that weren't frozen by the federal government." He slid a document across the desk. "Preston fought us on absolutely everything. Every asset, every dollar. His mother tried to intervene twice with bribes and threats. But the evidence was too strong. The courts saw through every tactic they tried. What does he get to keep? Legal fees, federal prison, the consequences of his choices." Grant's expression was carefully neutral. "Some people might say that's not enough, that he deserves worse. Some people might be right." Eleanor stirred in her carrier, made a small sound, settled back to sleep. Meredith looked at her daughter, 3 months old now, already developing a personality, already showing signs of the fighter she was going to become. She slept through the night most times, only cried when she was hungry or needed changing. Watched the world with eyes that had finally settled on a pale blue. Preston's eyes. That was the bitter truth she lived with every day. Eleanor had her father's eyes, would always have her father's eyes, would grow up looking in the mirror and seeing pieces of a man who had betrayed her mother before she was even born. "What happens now?" Meredith asked. "Now you rebuild. Start over. Create a new life for you and your daughter." Grant stood, walked to the window. The city stretched out below them, gray and wet with winter rain. "I've handled a lot of divorces in my career. Ugly ones, brutal ones, ones that destroyed everyone involved. But I've also seen people come out the other side stronger than they went in, more themselves than they ever were before. You think I'm one of those people? I think you've already proven you are." "Meredith," she corrected. "Just Meredith. No more Ashford. I'm going back to Collins." "Meredith Collins, then." He turned to face her. "Take time to heal, not just from the fall and the physical injuries, from everything. The marriage, the betrayal, the trial, the divorce. Let yourself grieve what you lost before you try to figure out what comes next." She left his office with a folder full of documents and a baby who was starting to wake up. Harper was waiting in the lobby. Louise had flown back to Denver, but called every single day. Lucia visited whenever she could, cooing over Eleanor like the grandmother she had never had. She had people. For the first time in years, she had people who were there because they wanted to be, because they loved her, not because they were paid or obligated or calculating what they could get from her. It should have been enough. But at night, alone in the small house she had rented near the coast, Meredith found herself unraveling. The divorce was final. The trial was over. Sloan was in prison. Preston would soon join her. Every external enemy had been defeated. Every battle had been won. So why did she still feel like she was falling? The answer came at 3 in the morning, during the dark hours when Eleanor slept and Meredith couldn't. She was sitting in the nursery, rocking in the second-hand chair she had bought at a thrift store, watching her daughter breathe. The soft rise and fall of that tiny chest, the occasional flicker of dreaming behind closed eyelids, the complete trust of a baby who didn't know yet that the world could hurt her. And suddenly Meredith was crying. Not the tears of relief she had cried when Sloane was convicted, not the tears of joy she had cried when Eleanor was born. These were different, deeper, the kind of tears that came from somewhere ancient and wounded, the kind that felt like they would never stop. She cried for the woman she had been, the one who believed in her husband, who trusted him with her heart and her future and her body, who let herself be diminished piece by piece, year by year, until there was almost nothing left of who she used to be. She cried for the mother she had almost never become. The fall replayed in her mind, over and over, the tumbling, the impact, the miracle of survival that should never have been necessary. 22 steps, any one of them could have killed her, could have killed Eleanor. She cried for the life she had imagined, the house full of children, the partnership of equals, the growing old together. All of it a fantasy built on lies, a castle made of sand, washed away by truth. And she cried for herself, for the years she had lost, for the time she could never get back, for all the moments she had spent trying to be what Preston wanted instead of figuring out who she actually was. The tears lasted until dawn. When Eleanor woke, hungry and demanding attention, Meredith's eyes were swollen and her throat was raw. But something had shifted. The dam had broken. The flood had come, and now maybe there was room for something new to grow in the space that remained. She fed her daughter as the sun rose over the ocean, visible from her window, pink and gold and impossibly beautiful. A new day, a new beginning. "I don't know who I am anymore," she said to Eleanor, who was too young to understand the words but listened anyway. "I spent so long being his wife, his project, his possession. I don't know what I like or what I want or what I believe in. I don't know what makes me happy. I don't know what I'm good at. I don't know anything about myself except that I loved a man who didn't exist." Eleanor finished eating, looked up at her mother with those pale blue eyes. "But I'm going to figure it out," Meredith continued. "For both of us, I'm going to figure out who I am when I'm not trying to be what someone else wants me to be. I'm going to learn who Meredith Collins really is." It was a promise, to her daughter, to herself, to the woman she used to be, and the woman she was going to become. A promise she intended to keep, no matter how long it took. A year passed. Meredith watched it unfold like a slow-motion film, days turning into weeks, weeks into months, season into season. Eleanor learning to roll over, to sit up, to crawl, to pull herself up on furniture, and take those first wobbly steps across the cottage's sunny kitchen floor. She had bought the cottage 3 months after the divorce was finalized. A small house near the coast, 3 hours from the city where her old life had collapsed. White walls, blue shutters, a wraparound porch where she could watch the sunset over the ocean every evening. A garden that was more weeds than flowers when she moved in, but had potential. Potential. That was what she saw in everything now. Not what something was, but what it could become with time and care and patience. The consulting business started almost by accident. A friend of Harper's needed help with organizational strategy for her small company. Meredith had good ideas, practical suggestions, the ability to see problems and solutions that other people missed. That friend referred another friend, then another. Then a former colleague heard about her work and reached out. Before she knew it, Meredith was turning away clients, building something that was entirely hers, creating a reputation based on her own skills, her own intelligence, her own work ethic. Not her husband's name, not her husband's money, not anything he had given her or could take away. She dropped Ashford officially, went back to her maiden name, Meredith Collins. It felt like putting on a comfortable old sweater she had forgotten she owned, like coming home after a long, terrible journey. Lucia came to help with Eleanor 3 days a week. She had found work with a family nearby on Meredith's recommendation and with Meredith's glowing reference. The connection between them had deepened into something like family. The woman who had saved her life, saved her daughter's life, now sat at her kitchen table every morning, drinking coffee and arguing good-naturedly about telenovelas. "You need to get out more," Lucia said one morning. "You're always working, always taking care of the baby. When was the last time you did something just for yourself? Something fun?" "I went to the grocery store yesterday." "That doesn't count." "I bought myself fancy cheese, the expensive kind in the little wedges." "Meredith," she sighed, set down her coffee cup. I know, it's just hard to trust anyone again, to put myself out there, to let anyone get close enough to hurt me. No one's asking you to get married tomorrow. I'm just saying you should have dinner with someone who isn't a baby, a housekeeper, or your sister on video chat." Meredith thought about it. The idea of dating, of opening herself up to another person, of being vulnerable again after everything she had been through. The thought made her stomach clench with anxiety. But underneath the fear, there was something else. A small, tentative curiosity. A what if that wouldn't quite go away, no matter how hard she tried to ignore it. "There's someone," she admitted. "Harper's been trying to set me up for months." Lucia's eyes lit up. "Who?" "A pediatrician at her hospital, David Chen. She says he's kind, patient, good with children, recently divorced himself, understands what it's like to start over." And I've said no. 3 times, 4 times, I'm not ready. I don't know if I'll ever be ready. Lucia nodded slowly, sipped her coffee. "Maybe you're not ready for a relationship, but maybe you could have coffee. Just coffee. See if he makes you laugh. See if you remember what that feels like." Meredith looked out the window. The ocean was visible in the distance, gray and wild and endlessly moving. She had learned to love that view over the past year, the constant change, the way the water was never exactly the same from one moment to the next. "I'll think about it," she said. She thought about it for 2 weeks, turned the idea over in her mind like a stone she kept in her pocket, examining it from every angle. Then Harper visited for a long weekend, and she brought Dr. David Chen with her. Conveniently, accidentally, with transparent matchmaking intentions that she didn't even try to hide. "I just thought you two should meet," Harper said innocently, "since you have so much in common. Both single parents, both rebuilding, both in need of adult conversation that doesn't involve diapers or custody agreements." David was not what Meredith expected. She had braced herself for charm, for confidence, for the kind of polished charisma that Preston had deployed like a weapon. Instead, David was quiet, thoughtful. He asked questions and actually listened to the answers without interrupting or steering the conversation back to himself. He laughed easily at small things. He didn't fill silences with the sound of his own voice. He played with Eleanor on the floor for 20 minutes, making ridiculous faces and silly noises until she was giggling uncontrollably. He helped clean up after dinner without being asked. He complimented Meredith's cottage without any of the condescension she had expected from someone used to city life. He didn't try to impress her, didn't brag about his career or his accomplishments or his plans, didn't treat her like a conquest or a project or a problem to be solved. "Your daughter is wonderful," he said when Eleanor finally tired herself out and fell asleep in his arms. "She has your smile. Everyone says she looks like her father. Maybe the shape of her face, the color of her eyes. But the smile, the way her whole face lights up when she's happy?" He handed Eleanor back carefully, gently, like she was something precious that deserved to be handled with care. "That's all you. Harper told you about everything? She told me you've been through something that would have broken most people, and that you came out the other side with your kindness intact." He paused, met her eyes. "I'd like to get to know that person, if you're willing to let me try." Meredith studied his face, looking for the hidden agenda, the manipulation, the angle. She didn't find any. Just a man, a kind, quiet, patient man who had been through his own darkness and found his way back to the light. "Coffee," she said finally. "We could start with coffee." His smile was warm, unguarded, real. "I'd like that." Coffee turned into dinner at a small restaurant by the water. Dinner turned into walks on the beach at sunset. Walks turned into long conversations about everything and nothing. Their pasts, their futures, their fears and hopes, and the small daily joys of raising children alone. David didn't push, didn't pressure, didn't try to rush her into anything she wasn't ready for. He just showed up, consistently, reliably, day after day. "I'm terrified," she admitted one evening. They were sitting on her porch, watching the sun sink into the ocean. Eleanor was inside with Lucia. The world felt soft, quiet, safe in a way she had almost forgotten was possible. Of what? Of everything. Of trusting someone again. Of being wrong again. Of letting someone close enough to hurt me. Of making the same mistakes. Of losing myself again. Those are reasonable fears. Important fears, the kind that keep you safe. But they also keep me alone. They don't have to. He was quiet for a moment. "I can't promise I won't hurt you. Everyone hurts each other sometimes, even when they don't mean to. But I can promise to be honest, to communicate, to treat you as an equal, not a possession or a project." He looked at her. "And I can promise to be patient, for as long as you need, as long as it takes." Meredith felt something shift inside her. That wall she had built around her heart, the one that had kept her safe but also kept her isolated. A crack was forming, small, but real. "I don't know if I'm capable of loving anyone again," she said. "I don't know if I remember how." "Then let me remind you." He took her hand, gently, one day at a time. She didn't pull away. Sloan Whitmore's sentencing hearing happened on a rainy Tuesday in March. The courthouse was smaller than Meredith remembered, less imposing. The hallways that had felt endless during the trial now seemed ordinary, manageable. Or maybe she had changed, grown, become someone who didn't shrink from challenges anymore. Meredith attended the hearing, not because she had to, not because anyone expected her to, but because she needed to see the end of this chapter, to watch the final page turn before she could fully move on with her life. The courtroom was quiet, somber. None of the circus atmosphere of the trial, just lawyers and officials and a few reporters in the back row, recording history for their evening broadcasts. Sloan was let in wearing an orange jumpsuit, prison issued. The designer clothes and careful styling were long gone. Her hair had grown out, roots showing, the expensive highlights faded. She looked older, harder. The pretty mask completely stripped away to reveal whatever had always been underneath. The judge read the sentencing guidelines, reviewed the facts of the case, acknowledged the impact statements that had been submitted. Meredith had written one. Had spent 3 days carefully choosing every word, not for revenge, not for satisfaction, but because she needed Sloan to understand what she had done, the real human cost of her choices. "You took something from me that can never be replaced," she had written. "Not just safety, not just trust. You took the ability to feel secure in my own home, in my own body, in my own judgment. You made me doubt myself, my memories, my perceptions. Every time my daughter takes a step toward stairs, I feel the echo of that fall. Every time I close my eyes, I see you standing at the top, watching me tumble, whispering that horrible word. You didn't just push me down those stairs. You pushed me out of the life I thought I had. You pushed me into becoming someone I never wanted to be. A woman who is afraid. A woman who sleeps with her doors triple locked. A woman who will spend the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, waiting for the next betrayal. But I want you to know something," she had concluded. "You failed. You pushed me down 22 marble steps, and I got up. My daughter got up. We survived. We are thriving. And every day that I wake up and hold my child and build my new life, I am proving that you didn't win. You never will." The judge looked at Sloan over the rim of her glasses. "Mr. Whitmore, you deliberately pushed a pregnant woman down a flight of stairs. You did so after planning and discussing the act for weeks. You showed no remorse after the fact. You smiled. You took pleasure in violence. You turned someone else's home into a crime scene. You turned someone else's body into a weapon against her unborn child." Sloan stared straight ahead, her jaw tight, her eyes empty. "This court sentences you to 8 years in state prison. You will be eligible for parole consideration after serving 5 years, contingent on good behavior and completion of rehabilitation programs. The judge's voice was cold, final. I hope you use this time to reflect on the choices that brought you here. And I hope that when you're released, if you're released, you choose differently. 8 years, 5 with good behavior. Meredith had expected to feel something when the sentence was announced. Satisfaction, relief, vindication. Instead, she felt tired, exhausted by the weight of everything that had happened, ready for it to finally be over. As Sloane was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, she turned, looked directly at Meredith. Something flickered in her eyes, hatred maybe, or something darker, deeper. Meredith held her gaze, steady, unflinching. Then she turned and walked out of the courthouse without looking back. Preston's trial took longer. The federal charges were complex, financial crimes spanning more than a decade. Fraud, embezzlement, bribery, tax evasion, money laundering. The evidence that Margaret Shen had uncovered, combined with Malcolm's documentation, painted a picture of systematic corruption at every level. Meredith didn't attend that trial. She had no desire to see Preston again. No interest in watching him try to charm his way out of consequences the way he had charmed his way through life. She read about the verdict in the newspaper, saw photos of Preston being led away in handcuffs, his face ashen, his expensive suit rumpled. The fallen tech mogul, the disgraced husband, the father who would spend his daughter's entire childhood behind bars, convicted on 12 counts, sentenced to 18 years. When she read the news, Meredith felt nothing. Maybe that was the strangest part. After everything Preston had done, after all the pain he had caused, she had expected to feel something when he finally faced consequences. Anger, satisfaction, even grief for the man she once thought he was. But there was just emptiness, a blank space where intense emotion should have been. Is that normal? She asked Louise during their weekly video call. To feel nothing when someone who destroyed your life gets punished? I think it means you've moved on, Louise said. He doesn't have power over your emotions anymore. Your happiness isn't tied to his misery. Your peace isn't dependent on his punishment. It feels wrong somehow, like I should care more. You spent years caring too much about what he thought, what he felt, what he wanted. Maybe not caring is exactly what you needed to learn. Eleanor crawled into frame on Meredith's side, grabbed at the phone, said something that might have been mama, or might have been banana, or might have been nothing at all. Hi, sweetheart, Louise cooed through the screen. Hi, beautiful girl. Are you keeping your mommy busy? Eleanor babbled happily in response. Meredith watched her daughter, 14 months old now, walking confidently, talking in her own private language that only she understood, growing into a person with preferences and opinions and a stubborn streak that was definitely inherited. This was what mattered. Not Preston's sentencing, not Sloane's imprisonment. This tiny human who was learning to navigate the world, who was counting on her mother to teach her how to do it safely. I have news, Meredith said when Eleanor wandered off to terrorize the cat. David and I are getting serious. Louise's face lit up. Finally, Harper has been keeping me updated on your glacial pace of dating, but I wanted to hear it from you. He asked me to meet his parents next month. He wants Eleanor to meet them too. That's huge, Mary. How do you feel about it? Meredith considered the question, turned it over in her mind the way she turned everything over now, carefully, thoroughly. Nervous, she admitted, but excited, which is new. I haven't been excited about anything romantic in years. He sounds like a good man. He is. He's clean, patient. He sees me, the real me. Not the version I think he wants. Not the role I think I should play. Just me. She smiled, actually smiled, without forcing it or planning it. And he still wants to be around. That's the miracle. That's not a miracle, Louise said. That's love. Real love. The kind that doesn't ask you to be anyone other than who you are. Love, the word had felt poisoned for so long, corrupted by what she had experienced with Preston. But David was teaching her that love didn't have to mean control. Partnership didn't have to mean diminishment. Trust didn't have to mean vulnerability to harm. I'm scared, she admitted. I'm so scared of getting it wrong again, of being fooled again. That's why you're not going to get it wrong, because you're asking the questions now, paying attention, trusting yourself. Louise paused. And because you have people who are watching out for you, Harper, Lucia, me. If David turns out to be anything less than he seems, we'll be the first to know and the first to tell you. After the call ended, Meredith sat in her cottage kitchen and listened to Eleanor play in the next room, babbling to herself, knocking blocks together, occasionally shrieking with delight at something only she understood. This life she had built, this small, quiet, and perfect life. It was hers. She had created it from the wreckage of her marriage, piece by piece, day by day, brick by brick. The fall didn't break her. The betrayal didn't break her. The man who was supposed to love her tried to break her and failed. She was still here, still standing, still moving forward. That was the only victory that mattered. 2 years after the fall, Meredith stood on the porch of her cottage and watched her daughter run through the garden. Eleanor was 2.5 now, all wild curls and endless energy. She was chasing butterflies through the flowers that had finally started to bloom properly, laughing at nothing in particular, marveling at everything she encountered. The garden had been transformed over the past 2 years. Meredith had spent countless hours on her knees in the dirt, pulling weeds, planting seeds, learning through trial and error what would grow in the salty coastal soil. Now there were rows climbing the trellis by the back fence, lavender lining the pathway, a stubborn patch of sunflowers that Eleanor had insisted on planting herself. "She's going to be a force of nature," David said, stepping out onto the porch with 2 cups of coffee in his hands. He handed one to Meredith, settled into the chair beside hers. Their chairs, his and hers, positioned together so they could watch the sunset over the ocean every evening. "She already is." Meredith took a sip of the coffee. Perfect. David had learned exactly how she liked it. Not too strong, just enough sugar. Her daycare teacher says she's a natural leader, organizes the other kids into elaborate games, gets upset when they don't follow the rules she's invented. Wonder where she gets that from. Meredith elbowed him gently. "I am not that bossy. You reorganized my entire kitchen last week. Your spice rack was in alphabetical order. Who puts paprika before oregano?" He laughed, that warm, easy laugh that had become one of her favorite sounds in the world. "I love you." The words came easily now, after 2 years of practice, 2 years of learning to trust again, 2 years of letting someone see her at her worst and discovering they still wanted to stay. "I love you too." Eleanor came running up the porch steps, clutching something in her fist. "Mommy, look, I found a ladybug." Meredith leaned down to examine the discovery, a single red-spotted beetle crawling across her daughter's palm. Delicate, beautiful, perfectly ordinary, and completely magical to a 2-year-old. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Can you count the spots?" 1, 2, 3, 4. Eleanor held up 4 fingers triumphantly. 4 spots. "Very good. Now put the ladybug back in the garden so she can find her family, okay?" Eleanor nodded seriously and raced back down the steps. The ladybug was deposited carefully on a rosebush with great ceremony. Then she was off again, chasing the next adventure. "I got a letter today," Meredith said quietly, "from Preston's lawyer." David's expression shifted. Careful, supportive, ready for whatever came next. "Another appeal on custody?" "Third one this year." She pulled the envelope from the pocket of her cardigan, still sealed. "His mother is funding them, even from prison. With his empire in ruins, he's still trying to control things, still trying to win. What are you going to do?" Meredith looked at the envelope, at her name printed in cold official letters. They still used Ashford, even though she had been Collins for nearly 2 years now. "I'm going to give it to Grant. Let him handle it the way he's handled all the others." She tucked the envelope away. "The courts have seen the evidence, heard the testimony, ruled in my favor every single time. Preston can file appeals until he's 100 years old. It won't change anything." "Eleanor doesn't ask about him?" "Not yet. She doesn't know she has a father out there somewhere. Doesn't know she's supposed to wonder." Meredith watched her daughter dancing through the garden, arms outstretched, chasing sunlight. "Maybe someday she will. Maybe someday I'll have to explain. Tell her the truth about who her father is and what he did. But for now, she has everything she needs. Love, stability, people who show up for her every single day. She has you, she has us. Meredith reached for his hand, intertwined their fingers. She has Harper, who spoils her completely. Louise, who video calls every week to read her stories. Lucia, who teaches her Spanish and makes her empanadas and treats her like a granddaughter. Malcolm, who sends birthday cards even though he's never met her. A whole community of people who chose to be in her life because they wanted to be, not because they had to. That's more than a lot of people have. It's more than I ever had growing up during my marriage. She squeezed his hand. I used to think family was about blood, about obligation, about the people you were stuck with, whether you wanted them or not. Now I know it's about choice. It's about the people who choose you and who you choose back. David was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his pocket, pulled out a small velvet box. Meredith's heart stopped. I was going to wait, he said, until dinner, until the sunset, until I had planned the perfect moment with flowers and music and everything you deserve. He opened the box. A simple diamond ring glinted in the afternoon light. Beautiful, elegant, nothing like the ostentatious rock Preston had given her, designed more to impress others than to mean anything. But I don't want to wait anymore. I've been waiting to find you my whole life, and I don't want to waste another minute pretending I'm not completely, terrifyingly, wonderfully in love with everything about you. Meredith stared at the ring, at this man who had shown her what love was supposed to look like, who had been patient when she needed patience, gentle when she needed gentleness, strong when she needed strength, present in all the ways that mattered. I know you've been hurt, David continued. I know trust doesn't come easy anymore. And I'm not asking you to forget what happened. I'm not asking you to pretend the past didn't shape you. I'm asking you to believe that the future can be different, better, that we can build something together that's based on honesty and respect and partnership. Something that's about lifting each other up instead of tearing each other down. Eleanor came running back up the steps. Noticed what was happening. Her eyes went wide. What's that? Is that for Mommy? David laughed, looked at Meredith with eyes full of hope and fear and love and vulnerability. That depends on what Mommy says. Eleanor looked between them, 2.5 years old, too young to understand the significance, but old enough to sense that something important was happening, that this moment mattered. Meredith thought about her journey, the fall, the hospital, the footage, the trial, the divorce, the darkness, the slow, painful climb back into the light. Every step had led her here, to this porch, this man, this moment, to a question she had never thought she would be able to answer yes to again. She thought about fear. She had been so afraid for so long, afraid of trusting, afraid of loving, afraid of being hurt again, afraid of making the same mistakes. But she had also learned that courage wasn't the absence of fear. Courage was feeling afraid and moving forward anyway, taking the risk, choosing hope over safety, believing in possibility when experience screamed at you to run. Yes, she said. David's face transformed. Joy, disbelief, wonder. The face of a man who had hoped but hadn't dared to expect. Yes? Yes, she laughed, tears streaming down her face, happy tears, the kind she had almost forgotten existed. Yes, I'll marry you. Eleanor cheered even though she didn't fully understand why. Jumped up and down on the porch, clapping her hands. Yes, Mommy said yes. David slid the ring onto Meredith's finger with hands that trembled slightly. It fit perfectly, like it had been made for her, like it had always belonged there. I love you, he said. I love your strength and your kindness and your courage. I love the way you love your daughter. I love the life you've built out of nothing but determination. I love who you are and who you're becoming. I love you too. Words she had thought she might never say again. Words that felt true in a way they never had before. I love you and I'm terrified and I'm choosing to do this anyway. That's the bravest thing anyone's ever said to me. She kissed him, soft and sweet and full of promise. The first kiss of their engagement, the beginning of something new. Eleanor tugged at her skirt impatiently. Mommy, are you happy? Meredith picked up her daughter, held her close. This tiny miracle who had survived so much, who had given her a reason to fight when fighting felt impossible, who had taught her that some things were worth any amount of pain, any amount of struggle, any amount of fear. Yes, baby, mommy is very happy. The sun was setting over the ocean, pink and gold and orange streaking across the sky like a painting made just for them. A new chapter beginning in the soft light of evening. Meredith looked at her daughter, at the man she loved, at the life she had built from the ashes of the one that had burned down around her. The fall didn't break her. The betrayal didn't break her. The man who was supposed to love her tried to break her and failed. She had survived 22 marble steps in a shattered marriage and the discovery that everything she believed was a lie. She had survived the hospital and the trial and the lonely nights and the slow, painful work of rebuilding herself from nothing. And now she was standing on the other side, stronger, wiser, more herself than she had ever been when she was trying to be who Preston wanted. Eleanor took her first steps in a cottage by the sea, held by a mother who had finally learned something important. She had never needed saving. She had never needed a man to complete her or protect her or give her life meaning. She had just needed to remember how to stand on her own 2 feet. And now she was running toward the future, toward hope, toward a happiness she had earned with every tear, every fight, every moment of choosing herself when the world told her to disappear. She was running, and nothing was ever going to stop her again. And that's the story of Meredith Collins. A woman who fell 22 steps and rose 1,000 miles higher than she ever was before. If this story moved you, if it made you angry, if it made you cheer, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Tell me what part shocked you the most. Was it the footage, the phone call to her mother, or Preston's silence when Sloane talked about accidents? And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Because every week I bring you stories just like this one. Stories of betrayal and justice. Stories of women who refuse to stay down. Stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat from the first word to the last. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Someone who might be going through their own battle. Someone who needs to know that falling down doesn't mean staying down. Thank you for staying until the end. You are the reason I tell these stories. Until next time.